There exists a Pokémon whose very appearance tells a story of loneliness transformed into something both gentle and heartbreaking. In the tropical warmth of Alola, beneath handmade disguises stitched from old cloth, a creature hides not from malice, but from necessity, wearing the face of another to protect those it hopes might one day become friends. Before you drift off, maybe tap subscribe for more gentle videos, and let me know where you're listening from tonight. And as the sun sets over Alola's beaches, we begin to understand why this particular ghost carries such weight in its concealed form. The Mimikyu species first appeared in the seventh generation of Pokemon games, introduced to players exploring the Alola region. This was not a creature born from typical design processes or straightforward concepts. Game Freak's developers created Mimikyu with a specific emotional core in mind, something that would resonate with feelings of isolation and the universal desire to be accepted. The design itself merged two distinct ideas that had been circulating within the development team for some time. One was the concept of a ghost Pokemon that wore a disguise, hiding its true form from the world. The other was a creature that specifically chose Pikachu as the template for that disguise, creating an immediate visual connection to the franchise's most recognizable mascot while simultaneously subverting it. The fusion of these concepts resulted in something more complex than a simple mimicry. Mimikyu's appearance features a roughly drawn Pikachu face on a yellowed, worn cloth body. The craftsmanship is deliberately imperfect, with jagged lines forming the eyes and mouth, thread holding the costume together in visible stitches. Beneath this disguise, a shadowy form can occasionally be glimpsed through gaps in the fabric, though the game and anime consistently maintain the mystery of what truly lies underneath. Two eye holes cut into the cloth allow Mimikyu to see, and through these openings, small points of light sometimes gleam, suggesting eyes or perhaps something else entirely. The costume itself shows signs of age and use. Frayed edges appear along the bottom of the cloth. Small tears occasionally mar the surface. The fabric has a texture that suggests handmade construction rather than natural growth, and this detail carries significant thematic weight. Unlike Pokemon, whose appearances are biological features, Mimikyu actively creates and maintains its disguise, an ongoing effort to present itself in a way that might earn affection rather than fear. The tail extending from the back of the costume deserves particular attention. Unlike Pikachu's lightning bolt-shaped tail, Mimikyu's tail appears as a piece of wood or a stick bent at an angle to roughly approximate the shape it's imitating. This wooden tail moves with a stiffness that contrasts sharply with the fluid movement of an actual Pikachu's tail, another reminder that this is imitation rather than genuine resemblance. Some game sprites and anime appearances show this tail dragging slightly when Mimikyu walks, adding to the impression of a costume that doesn't quite fit its wearer. The cloth covering Mimikyu measures taller than one might expect for its size category, creating an oversized appearance that adds to its uncanny quality. When Mimikyu moves, the fabric shifts and settles in ways that suggest something underneath does not fill the disguise completely, leaving empty spaces where the costume drapes over its hidden form. This creates an unsettling effect where the costume seems simultaneously too large and too small, never quite fitting properly, regardless of how Mimikyu adjusts it. The color palette reinforces this aged, worn quality. The yellow of the costume has faded to a cream or beige tone in many depictions, suggesting long exposure to sunlight or simply the passage of time. The black marker used to draw the Pikachu face has bled slightly in places, creating fuzzy edges that make the features appear less distinct than they were presumably meant to be. Even the red circles on the cheeks, meant to imitate Pikachu's electric sacs, appear as simple drawn circles rather than organic features, flat paint, or marker against worn fabric. These design choices create a creature that exists in a space of deliberate imperfection. Mimikyu is not trying to perfectly replicate Pikachu's appearance. It's trying to be close enough that others might approach, might see something familiar and friendly, might overcome whatever instinctive revulsion they would feel toward its true form. This distinction matters deeply to understanding Mimikyu's emotional core. The disguise is not meant to deceive, but to bridge a gap, to create just enough familiarity that connection becomes possible. The typing assigned to Mimikyu reflects its dual nature, ghost and fairy type, a combination unique to this evolutionary line within the Pokemon roster. The ghost typing connects to its spectral true form, whatever that form might be, while the fairy typing introduces themes of folklore and mythology, creatures that exist in spaces between human and inhuman, familiar and strange. This typing also provides interesting gameplay implications, creating a Pokemon with immunities to normal and fighting type moves while maintaining weaknesses to Ghost and Steel type attacks. These type matchups influenced how Mimikyu functions in competitive play, but they also carry thematic resonance. The immunity to normal type moves can be read as Mimikyu's resistance to conventional approaches, its ability to exist outside standard categories. The weakness to Ghost and Steel suggests vulnerability to both its own kind and to piercing, revealing attacks that might strip away the protective disguise. Game Freak's typing decisions rarely exist purely for mechanical balance. Instead, they reinforce narrative and emotional themes embedded in each Pokemon's concept. The Pokédex entries for Mimikyu reveal the darker implications of its disguise. According to these in-game descriptions, Mimikyu's true form causes illness, or worse, in anyone who sees it. The exact nature of this curse remains vague, but the consequences are consistently described as severe. Some entries mention that a scholar who witnessed Mimikyu's true form died from shock. Others note that Mimikyu itself doesn't wish to harm anyone, suggesting the curse is involuntary rather than weaponized. This creates a tragedy where Mimikyu wears its disguise not to deceive, but to protect others from its own inherent nature. The lore establishes that Mimikyu chose Pikachu as its disguise template because of Pikachu's popularity and perceived friendliness. In the Pokemon world, Pikachu merchandise is ubiquitous, appearing in stores, on clothing, as toys and decorations. This commercial success within the game's universe mirrors Pikachu's real-world status as the franchise mascot, creating a meta-textual layer where Mimikyu's choice reflects actual cultural reality. A Pokemon dressing as Pikachu is choosing the face most likely to be recognized and loved, the appearance most associated with positive feelings and approachability. This choice reveals Mimikyu's fundamental loneliness and desire for connection. It sees how others react to Pikachu, the smiles and affection that Pikachu receives, and it wants that same warmth directed toward itself. The disguise becomes an attempt to participate in that circle of affection, to be included in the positive associations that surround Pikachu's image. However, the imperfect nature of the disguise ensures that Mimikyu never fully achieves this goal. People can tell it's not actually Pikachu. The disguise is transparent enough that it creates unease rather than the warm familiarity Mimikyu seeks. This places Mimikyu in a perpetual state of almost, but not quite. It's almost Pikachu, but not quite convincing. It almost achieves acceptance, but not quite fully. It almost overcomes its isolation, but not quite successfully. This emotional space of constant near misses forms the core of Mimikyu's appeal to players and fans. Many people recognize that feeling of trying to fit in, of presenting a version of yourself you hope will be accepted, of knowing that no matter how hard you try, the disguise never quite works the way you hoped it would. The mechanical expression of Mimikyu's concept manifests through its signature ability, disguise. This ability allows Mimikyu to survive one attack that would otherwise damage it, with the disguise absorbing the hit instead. Mechanically, this functions as a free hit that Mimikyu can take without losing health, though subsequent attacks will deal damage normally. The visual representation of this ability shows Mimikyu's costume breaking or falling apart when struck, revealing more of the shadowy form beneath, while the costume itself becomes damaged and disheveled. This ability made Mimikyu extremely viable in competitive play, particularly in formats where setup time is valuable. A guaranteed survival of one attack allowed Mimikyu to safely use moves like Sword Stance to boost its attack power or to set up other field conditions without immediately being knocked out. The ability transformed what might have been a gimmick Pokémon into a legitimate competitive threat, capable of affecting matches at the highest levels of play. The narrative implications of the disguise ability mirror its mechanical function. Mimikyu can take one hit, one moment of violence or rejection, before truly being hurt. The disguise protects it from that initial blow, but once broken, Mimikyu becomes vulnerable. This creates a metaphor for emotional resilience and the protective barriers people construct around themselves. The first rejection might be absorbed by the facade we present to the world, but repeated rejection eventually penetrates those defenses, reaching the vulnerable self beneath. When Mimikyu's disguise breaks in battle, its appearance changes. The costume shifts, becoming crooked and damaged. In the game sprites, Mimikyu's head tilts to one side at an unnatural angle, the costume no longer able to maintain its upright position. This broken disguise form carries its own unsettling quality, a reminder that the protection has failed and what lies beneath is now more exposed. The damage is permanent for the duration of that battle, only resetting when Mimikyu is withdrawn or the battle ends. Base stat distribution reflects Mimikyu's role as a physical attacker. Its attack stat sits at 90, respectable but not overwhelming. Speed reaches 96, allowing Mimikyu to outpace many common threats. Defensive stats lean toward the lower end, with HP at 55 and defenses at 80 each. These numbers create a Pokémon that wants to hit hard and fast, using its disguise ability to guarantee at least one turn of setup or attack before potentially being knocked out. Move pool selection reinforces this physical attacking role. Mimikyu learns Shadow Claw and Play Rough naturally, providing strong same-type attack bonus moves for both its Ghost and Fairy typing. Shadow Sneak offers priority, allowing Mimikyu to strike first, regardless of speed tiers. Wood Hammer provides coverage against water, ground, and rock types. Sword Stance enables setup sweeping. The combination creates a versatile attacker capable of threatening a wide range of opponents, while the disguise ability provides the safety needed to execute these strategies. The decision to give Mimikyu these particular stats and moves shows Game Freak's understanding of how the disguise ability would function in competitive play. Without the ability, Mimikyu's stat spread would make it fragile and easily countered. With the ability, these stats become sufficient because Mimikyu is guaranteed at least one turn to act. The design is elegant in how it makes the thematic element, the disguise, into the mechanical centerpiece that defines how the Pokémon functions in battle. Mimikyu's presence in the Alola region feels narratively appropriate. Alola is depicted as a tropical paradise, bright and sunny, filled with beaches and festivals and celebration. Into this setting comes a Pokémon defined by darkness and isolation, a creature that hides from the light and fears being seen. The contrast creates thematic tension. Mimikyu exists as a shadow in a region of sunshine, a reminder that even in paradise, loneliness and fear persist. Not every Pokémon in Alola is happy and loved. Some remain hidden, hoping for acceptance they might never receive. The habitat information for Mimikyu indicates it can be found in abandoned sites, particularly the abandoned Megamart on Ula Ula Island. This location reinforces Mimikyu's association with forgotten and discarded things. The Megamart was once a bustling commercial center, now empty and decaying. Mimikyu lurking in this space suggests kinship with abandonment, with things that were once valued but are now neglected. The environmental storytelling adds depth to Mimikyu's character without requiring explicit exposition. Finding Mimikyu in this location requires specific conditions. It appears as a rare encounter, not readily available to casual exploration. Players must actively search the abandoned building, navigating its dusty aisles and empty shelves before potentially encountering the disguised ghost. This scarcity in the wild reinforces Mimikyu's isolated nature. It's not a Pokémon you stumble across frequently. You have to look for it in forgotten places, in locations other Pokémon and people have left behind. The process of catching Mimikyu follows standard encounter mechanics, but the context adds emotional weight. When a player throws a Pokeball at Mimikyu, they're offering it something its lore suggests it desperately wants: acceptance and companionship. The act of capturing becomes less about adding another entry to the Pokédex and more about offering this lonely creature a home, a trainer who won't be frightened away by its true form because that form remains hidden beneath its protective costume. Once caught, Mimikyu functions as a loyal team member, its in-game behavior showing no unusual characteristics compared to other Pokémon species. It follows the trainer, battles when commanded, can be petted and fed and cared for in Pokémon Refresh or later Pokémon Camp features. These interactions allow players to express affection toward Mimikyu in ways the Pokémon's lore suggests it craves. The gameplay systems designed to build bonds between trainer and Pokémon take on additional meaning when applied to a species defined by its desire for connection. If you're still awake halfway through, maybe subscribe before you drift off and tell me what time it is where you're watching from. The anime adaptation of Mimikyu introduced a specific individual of the species with a more complex characterization than the game's general species description. This particular Mimikyu appears in the Alola season of the anime, first encountered by Jesse James and Meowth of Team Rocket. The meeting occurs in a forested area when Team Rocket, searching for Pokémon to capture, mistakes Mimikyu for an actual Pikachu. Their excitement at finding what they believe to be Ash's signature Pokémon quickly turns to confusion when they realize this Pikachu is somehow different. Meowth, capable of speaking human language and understanding Pokémon speech, communicates with Mimikyu and immediately becomes disturbed by what he learns. The anime portrays Meowth's reaction as genuine fear, his usual confident demeanor shattering when Mimikyu speaks. The conversation between them is not shown directly to the audience. Instead, we see only Meowth's increasingly horrified expression as Mimikyu presumably explains its nature and its feelings about Pikachu. The decision to show Meowth's reaction rather than Mimikyu's words creates an effective horror moment in a generally child-friendly show. The audience doesn't know exactly what Mimikyu said, but Meowth's terror suggests it was deeply disturbing. This technique allows the anime to imply darkness without explicitly showing it, maintaining its age-appropriate rating while still conveying that Mimikyu represents something unsettling beneath its cute exterior. Meowth's curiosity leads him to attempt lifting Mimikyu's disguise, wanting to see what lies beneath the cloth. This proves to be a catastrophic mistake. The moment Meowth glimpses Mimikyu's true form, he collapses, his body going rigid as his consciousness is pulled into a near-death experience. The anime depicts this as Meowth walking down a dark corridor, ghost-type Pokémon lining the walls, beckoning him toward an ominous light at the end of the passage. The imagery clearly suggests death, with Meowth being guided toward the afterlife by spectral escorts. Only desperate intervention by Jesse and James prevents Meowth's death. They douse him with water, shake him, call his name, frantically trying to break whatever hold Mimikyu's true form has on his consciousness. Eventually, Meowth gasps back to awareness, his first words warning his teammates never to look under Mimikyu's disguise. The experience leaves him visibly shaken, his usual bravado replaced with genuine trauma. This scene establishes concrete stakes for Mimikyu's curse. It's not an abstract danger mentioned in Pokédex entries. It nearly kills a main character, making the threat real and immediate. Team Rocket flees after this encounter, wanting nothing to do with a Pokémon capable of inducing near-fatal visions. However, circumstances soon bring them back into contact with Mimikyu. When Ash and his Alola companions encounter the same Mimikyu, Pikachu engages it in battle. Team Rocket, hiding nearby, observes the fight and notices something crucial about Mimikyu's behavior. It fights with particular intensity against Pikachu, displaying an aggression that seems personal rather than territorial. It doesn't just want to defeat Pikachu in battle, it wants to destroy Pikachu specifically. Meowth translates Mimikyu's words during this battle, revealing to Jesse and James that Mimikyu harbors an intense hatred for Pikachu. This hatred isn't rooted in any personal offense Ash's Pikachu has committed. Instead, Mimikyu hates Pikachu as a concept, as a symbol. Pikachu represents everything Mimikyu is not and can never be. Pikachu is beloved without effort, recognized and celebrated everywhere it goes. People see Pikachu and smile, reach out to touch it, want to be near it. Mimikyu wears Pikachu's face and receives none of that warmth. The disguise only emphasizes the gap between what Mimikyu is and what it wishes it could be. This revelation reframes Mimikyu's disguise from protective measure to constant reminder of inadequacy. Every time Mimikyu looks at its reflection, it sees Pikachu's face staring back, a face that will never truly be its own. The disguise doesn't help Mimikyu feel closer to acceptance. It highlights how far away acceptance remains. The costume becomes a source of pain rather than comfort, yet Mimikyu continues wearing it because removing the disguise would mean exposing its true form, which would drive others away even faster. Team Rocket, recognizing Mimikyu's hatred as aligning with their own goals of capturing Pikachu, offers an alliance. Mimikyu accepts, joining Team Rocket not out of loyalty to their criminal organization, but because they provide a means to pursue its vendetta against Pikachu. This arrangement creates an unusual dynamic where Mimikyu is technically part of Team Rocket, but operates with its own agenda. It doesn't care about their schemes to steal Pokémon or impress Giovanni. It cares only about confronting and defeating Pikachu. Jessie formally captures Mimikyu, adding it to her team. The capture happens without a traditional battle, Mimikyu simply accepting the Pokeball because joining Team Rocket serves its purposes. This willing partnership differs from most captures in the anime, where Pokémon are either befriended over time or defeated and then caught. Mimikyu enters the arrangement as a transaction. It gets opportunities to battle Pikachu. Team Rocket gets a powerful teammate with a strong motivation to fight their recurring enemy. The relationship between Jessie and Mimikyu develops in interesting ways throughout the Alola arc. Jessie treats Mimikyu with genuine affection, calling it cute, praising its strength in battle, caring for it as she would any Pokémon partner. Mimikyu seems to appreciate this attention, responding to Jessie's commands in battle and showing no hostility toward her. However, Mimikyu's primary focus always remains on Pikachu. When Pikachu appears, Mimikyu's attention fixates entirely on its target, sometimes ignoring Jessie's strategic instructions in favor of attacking Pikachu directly. This single-minded focus creates problems for Team Rocket's plans. Jessie often develops strategies that require Mimikyu to target specific opponents or perform particular actions. Mimikyu will follow these plans until Pikachu enters its line of sight, at which point it abandons whatever it was supposed to be doing and launches itself at Pikachu. The unpredictability frustrates Jessie, though she generally seems understanding of Mimikyu's obsession, perhaps recognizing it as similar to her own persistent pursuit of Ash's Pikachu. Battles between Mimikyu and Pikachu occur regularly throughout the Alola anime arc. These confrontations showcase Mimikyu's impressive power and its ability to genuinely threaten Pikachu despite the latter's experience and strength. Mimikyu's disguise ability provides it with tactical advantages, allowing it to absorb one of Pikachu's attacks before taking actual damage. This forces Ash to develop strategies specifically to counter Mimikyu, recognizing it as a legitimate threat rather than just another of Team Rocket's Pokémon. The fights are portrayed with unusual intensity for Team Rocket encounters. Typically, battles between Ash and Team Rocket serve as comedic interludes, quickly resolved with Pikachu's Thunderbolt launching them skyward. Fights involving Mimikyu carry different energy. They're more serious, more evenly matched, with outcomes that aren't predetermined. Sometimes Pikachu wins. Sometimes the battle is interrupted before resolution. Sometimes Mimikyu gains the upper hand before circumstances intervene. The variation creates uncertainty, making each Mimikyu encounter feel consequential. Mimikyu's moves set in the anime includes Shadow Claw, Shadow Ball, and Play Rough, matching its game capabilities while providing visual variety in battle scenes. Shadow Claw manifests as dark energy claws extending from beneath Mimikyu's costume. Shadow Ball forms as a purple sphere of ghost energy launched from under the disguise. Play Rough is depicted with Mimikyu charging forward, the attack itself happening in a cloud of pink energy that obscures the actual contact, maintaining the mystery of Mimikyu's physical form. The animation team made interesting choices in how they depict Mimikyu's movement. Unlike Pikachu's fluid, organic motion, Mimikyu moves with a slightly jerky quality, its cloth body shifting in ways that don't quite match natural Pokemon locomotion. When it runs, the costume flutters and bounces. When it attacks, the fabric compresses and extends in exaggerated ways. These animation details reinforce that Mimikyu is wearing a costume rather than being what it appears to be. Subtle visual storytelling that works on a subconscious level. Voice direction for Mimikyu adds another layer to its characterization. In the Japanese version, Mimikyu's voice is high-pitched and distorted, with an echoing quality that suggests its voice is emanating from inside the costume rather than from a visible mouth. The English dub maintains similar qualities, creating a voice that sounds artificial and unsettling. This contrasts sharply with Pikachu's voice, which is clear and bright and immediately recognizable. Even in how Mimikyu sounds, it fails to achieve the approachable quality it's attempting to imitate. The Alola arc includes several episodes that focus specifically on Mimikyu's character development, exploring its psyche and motivations beyond simple Pikachu hatred. One notable episode involves Mimikyu encountering a reflection of its true form in water. This happens during a battle on a beach, where Pikachu's Iron Tail attack knocks Mimikyu backward, causing it to stumble near the water's edge. Looking down, Mimikyu sees itself reflected in the wet sand, and crucially, what it sees is not the Pikachu costume, but its actual form beneath. The anime doesn't show viewers what Mimikyu sees. We see only Mimikyu's reaction, its body language conveying shock and sadness. The disguised Pokémon stares at the reflection for a long moment, then visibly slumps, its costume drooping as whatever energy was animating it seems to drain away. This moment of confrontation with its true appearance affects Mimikyu profoundly, suggesting that it's been avoiding looking at itself, unwilling to face the form that causes such revulsion in others. Pikachu and Ash, witnessing Mimikyu's distress, react with concern rather than aggression. They don't press their advantage in the battle. Instead, they watch as Mimikyu processes this moment of self recognition. When Mimikyu collapses into the shallow water, losing consciousness from the emotional shock, Ash and Pikachu work together to pull it back to shore, ensuring it doesn't drown. This act of compassion represents a turning point, Pikachu helping the Pokémon that has been trying to destroy it, showing kindness without expectation of reward. Mimikyu awakens on the beach to find Pikachu watching over it. The two Pokémon regard each other in silence, the usual hostility absent. In this moment, something shifts in Mimikyu. It looks at Pikachu and seems to recognize that its hatred has been misdirected. Pikachu isn't responsible for Mimikyu's curse or isolation. Pikachu is simply being itself, existing without malice, and the affection it receives is not something it demands or manipulates. The hatred Mimikyu has carried is revealed as envy, as pain projected outward because directing it inward is too difficult to bear. Mimikyu makes a decision in this moment. It walks away from the beach, from Pikachu, from the rivalry that has defined its arc. This departure represents acceptance, not of its appearance but of its situation. It cannot change what it is. It cannot become Pikachu. The disguise will never make it loved the way Pikachu is loved. But continuing to fight Pikachu won't change these facts either. Walking away is an act of letting go, of choosing to stop pursuing something unattainable. Meowth finds Mimikyu shortly after this, sitting alone in the forest. The conversation between them represents one of the anime's more emotionally mature moments. Meowth, who has his own history of rejection and attempting to change himself to fit in, understands what Mimikyu is experiencing. He speaks to Mimikyu about self-worth, about being valued for who you are rather than who you pretend to be. He points out that Team Rocket, particularly Jessie, has shown genuine affection for Mimikyu. They didn't love it because they thought it was Pikachu. They loved it despite knowing exactly what it was. This conversation provides Mimikyu with a perspective it had been unable to reach on its own. It had been so focused on being like Pikachu that it failed to notice when Pokémon, accepted it as itself. The disguise was meant to make others comfortable, but the irony is that those who came to care for Mimikyu did so while knowing the disguise was a disguise. Jessie never mistook Mimikyu for an actual Pikachu. She caught it knowing exactly what species it was. Her affection was real, directed at Mimikyu specifically, not at the image it projected. Mimikyu sheds tears during this conversation, shown as dark drops falling from beneath its costume. The anime uses visual shorthand rather than showing Mimikyu's actual eyes, maintaining the mystery while conveying emotion. These tears represent release, the letting go of resentment and self-hatred that Mimikyu has carried. It doesn't immediately fix all of Mimikyu's psychological struggles. The curse remains. Its true form is still potentially deadly to those who view it, but the weight of comparing itself to Pikachu, of hating Pikachu for being what it is not, lifts slightly. Mimikyu returns to Team Rocket, joining Jessie, James, and Meowth as they prepare to leave the Alola region. Giovanni has recalled them to Kanto, ending their extended stay in the tropical region. Team Rocket faces a decision about their Alola Pokémon. They've caught several species native to the region during their time there, and they debate whether to bring these Pokémon back to Kanto or release them to remain in their natural habitat. The conversation about releasing their Alola Pokémon includes Mimikyu. Jessie, though fond of Mimikyu, worries that it would be happier remaining in Alola where it was caught. Mimikyu's reaction to this suggestion makes clear that it wants to stay with Team Rocket. Having found acceptance with them, Having formed bonds with trainers who valued it, Mimikyu is unwilling to return to isolation. The decision is made to bring Mimikyu along, allowing it to leave Alola and continue as part of Jesse's team. However, the anime ultimately depicts Mimikyu staying behind in Alola rather than traveling to Kanto. The specifics of this decision vary depending on interpretation, with some episodes suggesting Mimikyu remains with Beware, another Pokemon Team Rocket, befriended in Alola. The choice to leave Mimikyu in the Alola region narratively completes its arc, allowing it to remain in the place where it found acceptance and worked through its Pikachu obsession, even if that means separating from the trainers it bonded with. Mimikyu's appearances in later anime seasons are minimal. Pokemon Journeys, the series following the Alola arc, brings back characters and Pokemon from previous regions for cameo appearances, and Mimikyu appears briefly in this capacity. These appearances don't substantially develop its character further, instead serving as callbacks for fans and confirmation that the Pokemon is doing well in whatever situation it ended up in after Team Rocket left Alola. The cultural impact of Mimikyu extended well beyond its presence in games and anime. The Pokemon quickly became a fan favorite, resonating particularly strongly with audiences who connected to its themes of loneliness, disguise, and the desire for acceptance. Fan art depicting Mimikyu proliferated across social media platforms, much of it emphasizing the character's emotional vulnerability and tragic backstory. The Pokemon Company recognized this popularity, featuring Mimikyu prominently in merchandise, promotional materials, and crossover appearances. Mimikyu received its own song, a music video titled Mimikyu's Song, released officially by the Pokemon Company. The song, performed from Mimikyu's perspective, explores its feelings about being overlooked and overshadowed by Pikachu's popularity. The lyrics convey Mimikyu's desire to be loved and its sadness at living in Pikachu's shadow. The music video animation shows Mimikyu attempting various activities to gain attention and affection, consistently failing or being ignored until finding acceptance through being itself rather than imitating others. This official song demonstrates the Pokemon Company's awareness of why Mimikyu resonated with audiences. Rather than shying away from the character's darker themes, they leaned into them, creating content that acknowledged the pain and loneliness at Mimikyu's core. The decision to give a Pokemon its own emotionally vulnerable song was unusual. Typically, merchandise and promotional content emphasizes action and adventure rather than melancholy and introspection. Mimikyu warranted different treatment, its appeal rooted in its emotional depth rather than battle prowess or design coolness. Merchandise featuring Mimikyu often plays with the contrast between cute and creepy that defines the character. Plush toys are particularly common, with the handmade quality of Mimikyu's costume translated into actual fabric construction. Official Mimikyu plushes feature stitching that matches the character's appearance, cloth bodies with drawn-on faces, and removable costumes in some variants that reveal a simplified, non-lethal version of what might be underneath. These toys allow fans to own a physical representation of Mimikyu while maintaining the character's essential mystery. The popularity of Mimikyu led to it receiving unique attention in various Pokemon spin-off games and special features. Pokemon Sun and Moon featured a Mimikyu-themed photo spot where players could take pictures with Mimikyu in specific locations. Later games included Mimikyu in various forms, respecting its popularity by ensuring it remained accessible to players who wanted to use it. The competitive viability granted by its disguise ability meant Mimikyu appeared in official tournament play, giving it visibility in professional Pokemon battling contexts as well as casual play. Mimikyu's presence in the trading card game resulted in several card printations, each attempting to translate its ability and characteristics into TCG mechanics, e.g., cards featuring Mimikyu typically include abilities or attacks that reference its disguise or its ghost typing. Artwork on these cards ranges from cute depictions emphasizing the handmade costume to more atmospheric pieces playing up the mysterious and slightly unsettling aspects of the character. The variety in card artwork reflects Mimikyu's multifaceted appeal, able to be portrayed as adorable or creepy depending on artistic interpretation. The decision to create a Pokemon that exists in direct relationship to Pikachu, the franchise mascot, represents an interesting meta commentary by Game Freak. Pikachu's overwhelming popularity has been both blessing and curse for the Pokemon franchise. It's instantly recognizable, marketing gold, the face that appears on nearly every piece of Pokemon media. But this oversaturation can feel limiting, as if Pikachu represents all of Pokemon, when in reality, the franchise contains hundreds of unique creatures with their own appeal. Mimikyu serves as commentary on this dynamic. It's a Pokemon that literally wears Pikachu's face, attempting to capitalize on Pikachu's popularity while simultaneously highlighting how that popularity can overshadow other creatures. The fact that Mimikyu hates Pikachu in the anime adds another layer. The resentment one might feel towards something that receives attention effortlessly while others struggle for recognition. This could be read as Game Freak's own ambivalence toward their mascot's dominance, a way of expressing through fiction the complex feelings that come with having one creation completely eclipse others. The tragedy of Mimikyu is that it fails to recognize its own appeal while pursuing Pikachu's. Fans didn't love Mimikyu because it looked like Pikachu. They loved it precisely because it wasn't Pikachu, because it represented something different, something emotionally complex in a franchise that often keeps things light and accessible. Mimikyu's popularity stemmed from its differences, from the ways it subverted expectations and introduced themes of isolation and self-hatred that resonated with audiences on a personal level. This irony mirrors the character's own arc in the anime. Mimikyu spends so much time focused on Pikachu that it doesn't notice when people like Jessie and Meowth come to care for it. It's so convinced that being like Pikachu is the only path to acceptance that it overlooks the acceptance it has already received. The message is clear but not heavy-handed. Self-worth cannot be found by becoming someone else. It can only be found by accepting oneself and allowing others to accept you as you are. The design philosophy behind Mimikyu represents Game Freak's continued willingness to explore darker themes within the Pokemon universe. While Pokemon games maintain a generally optimistic tone, individual species often carry surprisingly dark Pokédex entries or backstories. Mimikyu fits into this tradition of Pokemon with tragic or unsettling origins, creatures whose existence involves suffering or loss. These darker elements provide depth to the game world, suggesting that not everything in the Pokemon universe is cheerful and friendly, that some creatures exist in pain or fear despite the overall positive tone. The contrast between Mimikyu's appearance and its lore exemplifies this approach. Looking at Mimikyu, you see something that could be mistaken for cute, a small creature in a homemade costume. Reading about Mimikyu, you discover a being cursed with an appearance that kills anyone who sees it, so desperate for connection that it hides itself away and imitates something more palatable. The dissonance between these two aspects, visual and narrative, creates a more memorable and impactful character than either element would achieve alone. This design strategy appears throughout the Pokemon franchise, but seems particularly refined in Mimikyu. The visual design is immediately appealing, featuring enough cuteness to attract attention while including slight off-putting elements that create intrigue. The lore and backstory provide emotional depth that transforms initial interest into genuine connection. The combination ensures Mimikyu isn't just another ghost-type Pokemon, in a franchise with dozens of ghost types. It's a specific character with a specific tragedy that players and viewers can engage with on an emotional level. The question of what actually lies beneath Mimikyu's disguise remains unanswered in official Pokemon media. The games and anime consistently refuse to show Mimikyu's true form, maintaining the mystery as part of the character's essential appeal. This decision, while potentially frustrating for those who want definitive answers, serves the character better than revelation would. The unknown is always more frightening and more intriguing than the known. Once Mimikyu's true form is revealed, it becomes concrete, definable, something the imagination no longer needs to engage with. By keeping the true form hidden, Game Freak and the anime producers allow each person to imagine their own version of what might be beneath the costume. This participatory element makes Mimikyu more personally engaging. Your Mimikyu hides something potentially different from someone else's Mimikyu. The collective mystery becomes individual interpretation, each person filling the gap with their own ideas based on the hints and suggestions provided by the Pokédex entries and anime moments. The few glimpses we do get of Mimikyu's form suggest something small and dark, possibly amorphous, visible only as shadows or fleeting silhouettes when the costume shifts. In the anime, when Meowth looks beneath the disguise, we see only his horrified reaction, not what he's seeing. When Mimikyu's costume breaks during battle, shadowy shapes emerge from the holes, but never coalesce into a clear form. These partial revelations tease without satisfying, maintaining engagement with the mystery while providing just enough information to fuel speculation. Fan theories about Mimikyu's true form range widely. Some suggest Mimikyu is fundamentally similar to other ghost-type Pokemon, perhaps resembling Ghastly or Haunter in having a spectral, gaseous form that the costume contains. Others propose that Mimikyu might be a fragment of something larger, a piece of a curse, or a lingering echo of death that gained its own consciousness. Still others theorize that Mimikyu's true form isn't inherently deadly, that the costume is a self-imposed prison based on a misunderstanding or a curse that could potentially be broken with the right intervention. The developers have occasionally hinted at Mimikyu's origins without providing concrete answers. Interviews suggest that the design process involved thinking about what kind of Pokemon would choose to hide itself and why. The conclusion was a creature whose appearance had some inherent quality that made others uncomfortable or fearful, creating the motivation for the disguise. Whether this quality is supernatural, physical, or something else remains deliberately vague, allowing the concept to remain flexible and interpretable. Mimikyu's relationship with other ghost-type Pokemon is worth examining. Ghost types in Pokemon often have tragic or unsettling origins. Yamask carries a mask that was its face when it was human. Phantump are spirits of children who died in forests. Drifloon is said to spirit away children who grab its string-like hand. Mimikyu fits this pattern of ghost types with sad or disturbing backstories, but it adds an additional layer by being actively aware of and affected by its curse. Many ghost-type Pokemon simply exist in their ghostly state without apparent distress about it. They're ghosts, and then that's simply what they are. Mimikyu is different. It's tormented by what it is, actively working to hide its nature from others. This self-awareness and suffering distinguishes Mimikyu from most other ghost types, making it perhaps the most emotionally complex ghost Pokemon in terms of how it relates to its own existence. The fairy typing added to Mimikyu creates interesting implications when considered alongside its ghost typing. Fairy types in Pokemon are often associated with cuteness, with magic in a more whimsical sense, with protection and healing. The combination of fairy and ghost suggests something that exists between states, neither fully alive nor fully dead, neither wholly friendly nor wholly threatening. This liminality defines Mimikyu, a creature that occupies spaces between categories, never entirely one thing or another. Fairy types are also associated in Pokemon lore with being protectors of forests and natural spaces, with existing in harmony with nature. Mimikyu subverts this expectation. It's a fairy type that haunts abandoned buildings, that frightens rather than comforts, that exists in discord with its environment. The typing seems almost ironic, as if Mimikyu is classified as fairy, because that's what it should be, what it tries to be, even though its nature as a ghost prevents it from fulfilling that role properly. The evolution question surrounding Mimikyu has been a point of discussion among fans. Mimikyu does not evolve into or from any other Pokemon. It's a standalone species, complete in itself. Some fans have expressed disappointment at this, wishing for an evolution that might represent Mimikyu overcoming its curse or finding acceptance. Others argue that giving Mimikyu an evolution would undermine its thematic purpose. The point is that Mimikyu remains trapped in its current state, unable to change what it fundamentally is. This lack of evolution reinforces Mimikyu's tragic nature. Most Pokemon have the potential to evolve, to grow and transform into something new. Evolution in Pokemon represents progress, development, becoming stronger or more complete. Mimikyu has no such path available. It is what it is, and it will remain what it is. The only change possible is in how Mimikyu relates to itself, in finding acceptance or peace within its unchangeable circumstances. The anime's resolution of Mimikyu's arc reflects this, showing psychological growth rather than physical transformation. Regional variants of Mimikyu have not been introduced in subsequent Pokemon generations, another decision that seems thematically appropriate. Regional variants typically show how a Pokemon species adapts to different environments, developing new characteristics suited to new habitats. Mimikyu's whole concept revolves around it not adapting, not changing, remaining hidden behind its disguise. Creating regional variants would suggest Mimikyu successfully adapts to different circumstances, which runs counter to the character's essential nature. The competitive battling scene embraced Mimikyu quickly after its introduction. The disguise ability made it immediately viable, and players began experimenting with different strategies to maximize its potential. Standard competitive sets typically focused on maximizing attack power through Swords Dance, using the guaranteed survival from disguise to set up safely before sweeping opposing teams. Alternative sets explored options like Trick Room support, where Mimikyu's relatively low speed became an advantage in the reversed speed priority created by the move. The presence of Mimikyu in competitive play created interesting metagame dynamics. Opposing players had to decide whether to immediately try breaking through disguise with a strong attack or to attempt setting up their own strategies, knowing Mimikyu would get at least one free turn. The mind games involved in predicting how Mimikyu players would use that free turn added strategic depth to matches. Would they set up with Swords Dance, attack immediately, switch to something else to preserve disguise for later? Tournament results showed Mimikyu's effectiveness at high-level play. It appeared regularly in team compositions for official championships, proving that its combination of ability and typing and move pool was not just gimmicky but genuinely strong. Professional players developed specific counter strategies, Pokemon and moves particularly effective at handling Mimikyu, which in turn led to Mimikyu players adapting their own strategies. This back and forth created a healthy competitive dynamic where Mimikyu was strong but not overwhelming, useful but not mandatory. The implementation of Mimikyu in later Pokemon games maintained its core characteristics while adjusting for new mechanical features. Pokemon Sword and Shield allowed Mimikyu in the main story and competitive formats, keeping its disguise ability and stat distribution identical to its Generation 7 introduction. The addition of Dynamax mechanics created new options for Mimikyu, allowing it to temporarily become massive and gain access to max moves that could change weather, set terrain, or apply other field effects. Pokemon Scarlet and Violet continued this trend, including Mimikyu in the Paldea region Pokédex and maintaining all its previous characteristics. The new Terra Style phenomenon allowed Mimikyu to temporarily change its type, opening up even more strategic options. A Mimikyu with a Terra type of ghost, for example, could boost the power of its Shadow Claw and Shadow Ball moves while maintaining its Fairy type until terraced Alizing. These new mechanics provided Mimikyu with additional versatility without fundamentally altering how the Pokemon functioned. Mimikyu's presence in Pokemon Go, the mobile augmented reality game, introduced the character to a different audience and format. As a relatively rare spawn, Mimikyu maintained its special status even in a game with hundreds of available species. The implementation of disguise in Pokemon Go's simplified battle system required adaptation. The ability was translated to providing shields in trainer battles, giving Mimikyu automatic protection against a certain number of charge moves. While not identical to its main series function, this adaptation captured the spirit of the ability within the constraints of Pokemon Go's mechanics. The social aspect of Pokemon Go led to interesting phenomena around Mimikyu. Players would announce Mimikyu spawns in local groups, prompting others to travel to that location to catch one. Community Day events featuring Mimikyu or related Pokemon drew large turnouts. The rarity and popularity of Mimikyu made it a status symbol of sorts, something players wanted to show off in gyms or during raids. This social dynamic mirrored Mimikyu's lore in an unintentional way, the Pokemon that wants to be noticed and valued achieving that goal within the Pokemon Go community. Mimikyu appeared in several Pokemon spin-off games beyond the main series and Go. Pokemon Mystery Dungeon, Rescue Team DX included Mimikyu as a recruitable partner Pokemon, allowing players to experience dungeon crawling from Mimikyu's perspective. Pokken Tournament DX, the fighting game spin-off, featured Mimikyu as a support Pokemon, appearing during battles to use Shadow Claw against the opponent. These appearances kept Mimikyu present across different genres of Pokemon games, ensuring fans who primarily played spin-offs still encountered the character. The crossover between Pokemon and other franchises occasionally featured Mimikyu. Collaborations with clothing brands produced Mimikyu-themed apparel. Cafes and restaurants in Japan hosted Pokemon events with Mimikyu featured prominently in special menu items and decorations. Theme park attractions included Mimikyu in shows and meet and greet opportunities. These real-world appearances expanded Mimikyu's presence beyond digital spaces, making it part of physical experiences that fans could engage with directly. The Halloween association with Mimikyu became another aspect of its cultural presence. As a ghost type with a creepy, cute aesthetic, Mimikyu naturally fit Halloween themes. Pokemon Halloween events regularly featured Mimikyu in promotional art, special in-game distributions, and seasonal merchandise. This seasonal connection reinforced Mimikyu's identity as a character that exists between cute and creepy, equally at home in contexts emphasizing either quality. The artistic fan community embraced Mimikyu enthusiastically, producing vast amounts of fan art, fan fiction, and other creative works. Common themes in this fan-created content include exploring Mimikyu's loneliness, imagining scenarios where Mimikyu finds acceptance, or creating original stories about specific Mimikyu individuals. Some fan works lean into the horror aspects, creating genuinely unsettling interpretations of what might lie beneath the disguise. Others emphasize the sadness and tragedy, portraying Mimikyu as a sympathetic figure deserving of compassion. Fan comics depicting Mimikyu's daily life or interactions with other Pokémon proved particularly popular on social media. These short, often wordless comics would show Mimikyu attempting to participate in activities with other Pokémon, sometimes succeeding in finding acceptance, sometimes facing rejection. The format allowed artists to explore Mimikyu's character through quick, emotionally impactful scenarios that resonated with audiences who connected to the theme of trying to fit in. The mimetic potential of Mimikyu led to its inclusion in various internet memes and jokes. Images of Mimikyu with captions about social anxiety, imposter syndrome, or feeling overlooked circulated widely. While these memes sometimes simplified Mimikyu's character, they also demonstrated how deeply the Pokemon's themes resonated with internet communities. People saw themselves in Mimikyu, their own struggles with self image and acceptance reflected in this creature hiding beneath a costume. The question of whether Mimikyu represents disability or neurodivergence has been raised in discussions analyzing the character. The idea of a being whose natural state makes others uncomfortable, forcing it to mask or disguise itself to be accepted in society, parallels experiences described by people with various disabilities or neurodivergent individuals. Whether this was intentional on Game Freak's part remains unclear, but the reading resonates with many fans who see their own experiences reflected in Mimikyu's struggle. This interpretation adds another layer to Mimikyu's appeal. Beyond being a ghost, Pokemon with a sad backstory, it becomes a character that speaks to real-world experiences of marginalization and forced conformity. The disguise represents masking, the exhausting practice of hiding one's true self to avoid negative reactions from others. Mimikyu's discovery that Team Rocket accepted it while knowing it wasn't actually Pikachu parallels the experience of finding people who accept you without requiring you to hide or pretend. The design of Mimikyu's disguise itself has been analyzed from various angles. The handmade quality suggests Mimikyu creates its own disguises rather than being born with them. This implies Mimikyu has some level of crafting ability, that it studies Pikachu's appearance and attempts to recreate it using whatever materials it can find. The imperfection of the disguise could represent limited resources or skill, or it could be intentional, Mimikyu creating something that's close enough to be recognizable, but not so perfect as to be mistaken for the real thing. The fact that multiple Mimikyu all wear similar Pikachu disguises raises interesting questions about Mimikyu culture. Do Mimikyu share techniques for creating disguises? Is there a tradition or knowledge passed down about how to construct the costume? Or does each Mimikyu independently arrive at the same solution, Pikachu being such an obvious choice that all Mimikyu naturally gravitate toward it? The games and anime don't answer these questions, leaving room for interpretation and speculation. The materials used in Mimikyu's disguise appear to be simple cloth and drawing implements. This suggests Mimikyu either finds these materials in human habitations or has some way of acquiring them. The image of Mimikyu sneaking into homes or stores to take scraps of cloth and markers to create its disguise adds a layer of both sadness and resourcefulness to the character. It's actively working to solve its problem, taking initiative to create something that might help it achieve its goals, even if the solution is imperfect. Some Pokédex entries mention that Mimikyu's rag becomes worn over time and occasionally needs to be replaced or repaired. This suggests the costume is not a permanent fixture, but something Mimikyu maintains and cares for. The idea of Mimikyu sitting alone in its abandoned building home, carefully stitching repairs into its costume, or constructing a new one when the old becomes too damaged, reinforces the character's solitary and self-sufficient nature. It doesn't rely on others to maintain its disguise. It handles this burden alone. The choice to make Mimikyu's costume specifically resemble Pikachu from 20 years ago adds an interesting detail found in certain Pokédex entries. This suggests Mimikyu based its disguise on an older design or older merchandise of Pikachu, which implies either that the original Mimikyu, who started this trend, encountered Pikachu merchandise 20 years prior to current game events, or that Mimikyu are copying a disguise pattern that's been passed down without updating it to match Pikachu's current appearance. Either interpretation adds depth, suggesting Mimikyu's solution is not just imperfect, but potentially outdated, making it even less effective at achieving the acceptance it seeks. The sociology of the Pokemon world regarding Mimikyu remains understudied within the fiction itself. How do humans in the Pokemon world react to Mimikyu? Do they recognize it immediately as not really Pikachu? Are they frightened by its reputation for causing illness or death to those who see its true form? Or do most people simply see a cute ghost type and interact with it normally? The games suggest Mimikyu is relatively rare, which might mean most people never encounter one and thus have no established reaction to the species. Trainers who catch Mimikyu presumably know what they're catching, understanding the risks associated with its true form. The fact that Mimikyu can be captured and kept like any other Pokemon suggests the Pokeball itself provides some protection, containing Mimikyu in a way that prevents accidental exposure to its true form. This practical solution allows Mimikyu to be part of a trainer's team without the constant danger of someone accidentally seeing what's beneath the costume during care or training. The bond between trainer and Mimikyu takes on additional significance given the species' need for acceptance. For Mimikyu, being chosen by a trainer isn't just about partnership in battle, it's validation, proof that someone values it enough to keep it, despite knowing what it is. The choice to catch and keep a Mimikyu is an active acceptance of the Pokemon, knowing its curse and choosing to include it anyway. This makes the trainer Mimikyu relationship potentially more meaningful than with other species where such explicit acceptance isn't necessary. The bond between trainer and Mimikyu takes on additional significance given the species' need for acceptance. For Mimikyu, being chosen by a trainer isn't just about partnership in battle, it's validation, proof that someone values it enough to keep it, despite knowing what it is. The choice to catch and keep a Mimikyu is an active acceptance of the Pokemon, knowing its curse and choosing to include it anyway. This makes the trainer Mimikyu relationship potentially more meaningful than with other species, where such explicit acceptance isn't necessary. The progression of how players encounter Mimikyu throughout various games shows careful attention to maintaining its mystique while making it accessible to those who want it on their team. In Generation 7, the first appearance of Mimikyu requires navigating to specific locations and sometimes waiting for particular weather or time conditions. This scarcity reinforces the idea that Mimikyu is not something you casually stumble upon. Finding Mimikyu requires effort, intention, searching in the right places at the right times. When players do encounter Mimikyu in the wild, the battle music shifts to a more ominous tone than typical wild encounter themes. This musical choice signals that Mimikyu is not just another Pokemon to catch and move on from. The encounter itself is framed as significant, as something worth paying attention to. The music creates atmosphere, transforming a standard random encounter into something that feels deliberate and important within the game's narrative structure. The catch rate assigned to Mimikyu strikes a balance between challenging and reasonable. It's difficult enough that players can't simply throw a single Pokeball and expect success, but not so difficult that catching one becomes an exercise in frustration. This measured difficulty respects player time while maintaining Mimikyu's status as a special encounter. The process of wearing down Mimikyu's health, dealing with its disguise ability, and finally succeeding in capture creates a memorable moment that sticks with players long after completing the game. Once caught, training Mimikyu involves considerations different from most other Pokemon species. Its stat distribution means it benefits more from certain training methods than others. Effort values, the hidden statistics that determine a Pokemon's growth, are typically allocated toward attack and speed for Mimikyu, maximizing its offensive capabilities and ensuring it moves before opponents. The investment in these particular stats transforms Mimikyu from merely functional to genuinely threatening in battles. The move learning progression for Mimikyu as it levels up provides a natural power curve that mirrors player progression through the game. Early moves are relatively weak but reliable, giving new Mimikyu adequate tools for basic encounters. As it levels, Mimikyu gains access to stronger attacks and more strategic options, allowing it to contribute meaningfully to team composition, even in late game scenarios. This progression ensures Mimikyu remains relevant, whether caught early in the player's journey or added to the team later. Technical machines and move tutors expand Mimikyu's move pool significantly beyond what it learns naturally through leveling. Moves like Will-O-Wisp allow Mimikyu to burn opponents, halving their physical attack power while dealing residual damage each turn. Substitute creates a decoy that absorbs hits, working in tandem with Disguise to give Mimikyu multiple layers of protection. Taunt prevents opponents from using status moves, disrupting their strategies while Mimikyu sets up or attacks. These additional moves provide flexibility, allowing players to customize their Mimikyu's moveset for different strategic purposes. The breeding mechanics surrounding Mimikyu created interesting possibilities for players looking to optimize their team. Mimikyu can pass down certain moves through breeding that it cannot learn through normal means. This process of egg move inheritance allows for move combinations not otherwise possible, opening up strategic options unavailable to Mimikyu caught in the wild. Players invested in competitive battling often spent significant time breeding Mimikyu to obtain these specific move combinations, along with optimal individual values, the random stat variations that determine a Pokemon's potential. Nature selection represents another layer of optimization for competitive Mimikyu. Different natures boost certain stats while lowering others, and choosing the right nature can significantly impact Mimikyu's battle performance. Adamant nature, which boosts attack while lowering special attack, is often preferred since Mimikyu doesn't use special attacks in most competitive sets. Jolly nature provides a similar benefit while boosting speed instead of lowering special attack, allowing Mimikyu to outspeed faster opponents. These choices, while technical, demonstrate the depth of strategy involved in preparing Mimikyu for competitive use. The disguise ability's interaction with various game mechanics created situations that required specific understanding to use effectively. Priority moves, which bypass normal speed calculations and strike first, could potentially waste disguise if players weren't careful about predicting opponent actions. Status moves that don't deal direct damage interact with disguise in specific ways, some triggering it and others not, depending on the exact mechanics of each move. Learning these interactions separated casual Mimikyu users from those who truly mastered the Pokemon's competitive potential. Entry hazard moves like Stealth Rock present particular challenges for Mimikyu. These moves place damaging rocks on the opponent's side of the field that hurt Pokemon when they switch in. Because Disguise activates in response to damage, switching Mimikyu into Stealth Rock breaks its disguise, eliminating the ability's protective benefit before Mimikyu can take any offensive action. This interaction forced players using Mimikyu to carefully consider team composition, often including Pokemon capable of removing entry hazards to preserve Mimikyu's ability for more crucial moments. weather conditions and terrain effects interact with Mimikyu in ways that create additional strategic considerations. Harsh sunlight boosts fire-type moves that Mimikyu might face, while rain strengthens water attacks. Some players built teams that controlled weather to create favorable conditions for Mimikyu, while others prepared Mimikyu to function regardless of weather state. Terrain effects like psychic terrain prevent priority moves from working, which can protect Mimikyu from quick attacks that might otherwise break its disguise unexpectedly. The held item selection for Mimikyu offered several viable options, each supporting different playstyles. Life Orb increases the power of all Mimikyu's attacks at the cost of taking damage after each move. This aggressive item choice maximizes Mimikyu's offensive potential, turning it into a powerful sweeper capable of knocking out multiple opponents in succession. The self-inflicted damage from Life Orb doesn't break Disguise, as the ability only triggers in response to opponent attacks, making it a natural fit for Mimikyu's kit. Alternative held items provide different benefits suited to different strategies. Lumberry cures any status condition that Mimikyu might suffer, protecting against burns that would have its attack power or paralysis that would reduce its speed. Focus Sash ensures Mimikyu survives any attack from full health with at least 1 HP remaining, providing a backup protection similar to Disguise itself. Mental Herb prevents the flinching caused by Fake Out, a priority move that some opponents use specifically to break Disguise on the turn Mimikyu enters battle. The decision between these items depends on team strategy and what role Mimikyu fills within that strategy. Teams built around aggressive offense prefer Life Orb to maximize damage output. Teams facing particular threats might choose items that counter those specific threats. The flexibility in item choice demonstrates Mimikyu's versatility, its ability to adapt to different team compositions and strategic approaches without fundamentally changing how the Pokémon functions. Mimikyu's presence in double battles, where each side fields 2 Pokémon simultaneously, creates different strategic dynamics than in single battles. The Disguise ability protects Mimikyu from one attack, but in doubles, opponents can easily break the Disguise with a weak move from one Pokémon while setting up a powerful attack with their other. This forces Mimikyu players to think carefully about positioning and prediction, anticipating how opponents might try to eliminate Disguise quickly to make Mimikyu vulnerable. Support moves take on increased importance in double battle scenarios. Protecting teammates becomes possible, with Mimikyu using moves like Taunt to prevent opponents from setting up field conditions that would hinder its partner. The ability to threaten multiple opponent types with its Ghost and Fairy attacking moves makes Mimikyu flexible in targeting, able to pressure whichever opponent poses the greatest threat at any given moment. This flexibility makes Mimikyu a solid choice for double battle teams, even though its ability functions somewhat differently in that format. The use of Mimikyu in official video game championship tournaments demonstrated its viability at the highest levels of competitive play. Professional players incorporated Mimikyu into winning team compositions, showcasing innovative strategies and unexpected move choices. Tournament matches featuring Mimikyu often became highlights, with commentators noting the importance of Disguise in determining battle outcomes. These high-profile appearances cemented Mimikyu's reputation as not merely popular, but legitimately powerful. Some tournament players developed specific Mimikyu sets designed to counter common strategies used at championship events. These specialized builds might prioritize different stats or use unusual move combinations tailored to the predicted metagame. The willingness of professional players to customize Mimikyu so specifically demonstrated deep respect for its strategic potential. Mimikyu wasn't being used because players liked the character, though many did. It was being used because it could win matches against the best players in the world. The fluctuation of Mimikyu's usage rates across different competitive seasons reflects the dynamic nature of Pokemon's metagame. When certain strategies became dominant, Mimikyu's usage might drop if those strategies countered it effectively. When the metagame shifted toward different threats, Mimikyu usage would rise as players recognized its effectiveness against the new popular Pokemon. This ebb and flow demonstrates healthy game balance, with no single Pokemon remaining permanently dominant, while Mimikyu maintained consistent relevance across multiple seasons. The online battle systems in Pokemon games allowed casual players to experience Mimikyu's competitive potential without attending official tournaments. Ranked ladder play brought players of all skill levels together, and Mimikyus appeared frequently across all ranks, from beginners to top-tier competitors. This widespread use indicated that Mimikyu appealed to and functioned well for players, regardless of their competitive experience level. Beginners could use basic Mimikyu strategies effectively, while experts found depth in optimizing every detail. Mimikyu's role in the Pokemon anime's Alola arc included several memorable battles beyond its encounters with Pikachu. These additional fights showcased Mimikyu's moveset and battle style while developing its relationship with Team Rocket. In battles against other wild Pokemon or rival trainers, Mimikyu consistently performed well, contributing to Team Rocket's successes, even when their schemes ultimately failed for other reasons. These victories established Mimikyu as genuinely skilled in battle, not merely obsessed with Pikachu to the exclusion of actual combat ability. The animation of Mimikyu's attacks in the animus provided visual interpretations of moves that game sprites could only suggest. Shadow Claws manifests as dark purple energy erupting from beneath the costume, forming claw shapes that rake across opponents. The energy looks semi-solid, corporeal enough to deal physical damage while maintaining a ghostly, supernatural quality. The animation emphasized the power behind these strikes, making clear that Mimikyu's attacks are not to be underestimated despite its small size and cute disguise. Play Rough, Mimikyu's fairy-type move, is depicted with characteristic Pokemon anime creativity. The move surrounds both Mimikyu and its target in a cloud of sparkling pink energy, obscuring the actual attack from view. This visual choice serves multiple purposes. It matches the game's animations while maintaining the mystery of Mimikyu's form, preventing the need to show what Mimikyu physically does during the attack. The sparkles and energy effects communicate power and impact without requiring detailed depiction of the combat itself. Defensive animations show how Mimikyu uses its costume to absorb or deflect attacks. When struck by moves like Thunderbolt or Flamethrower, the costume bears the brunt of the impact, smoking or singeing, but protecting whatever lies beneath. The anime visualizes the disguise ability through these moments, showing the costume taking damage while Mimikyu itself remains unharmed. Once disguise breaks, subsequent attacks visibly affect Mimikyu more severely, showing it flinching or being knocked back by impacts that previously seemed ineffective. Meowth's role as translator in the anime provided insight into Mimikyu's personality and thoughts that wouldn't otherwise be accessible to human characters or viewers. Through Meowth, we learn that Mimikyu has a distinct voice and way of speaking, preferences and opinions beyond just its Pikachu obsession. These translated moments humanize Mimikyu, making it feel like a character, with agency and complexity, rather than simply a creature defined entirely by its curse and costume. The relationship dynamics between Mimikyu and other members of Team Rocket evolved throughout the Alola arc. James, initially frightened by Mimikyu after witnessing what it did to Meowth, gradually becomes comfortable with its presence on the team. He still maintains cautious respect for Mimikyu's power, but he comes to appreciate its battle strength. and occasionally shows it affection similar to how he treats his other Pokémon. This gradual acceptance mirrors Mimikyu's own arc, finding people who move past initial fear or discomfort to genuine care. Wobbuffet, Team Rocket's comedic psychic type Pokémon that appears whenever released from its Pokeball, has interesting interactions with Mimikyu. Wobbuffet seems unbothered by Mimikyu's appearance or reputation, treating it with the same friendly obtuseness it shows everyone. This lack of fear or discomfort from Wobbuffet might be read as simple mindedness, but it also represents unconditional acceptance. Wobbuffet doesn't judge or evaluate Mimikyu. It simply accepts Mimikyu as another teammate, providing a different kind of companionship than the more conscious acceptance from Jessie and Meowth. The costume repair scenes, occasionally shown in the anime, add domestic detail to Mimikyu's life. In the background of Team Rocket's base or camp, viewers might catch glimpses of Mimikyu adjusting its costume, stitching loose threads, or cleaning dirt from the fabric. These small moments emphasize the ongoing effort required to maintain the disguise. It's not a static costume, but something that requires care and attention, a responsibility Mimikyu bears constantly. The implication that Mimikyu spends quiet moments alone maintaining its disguise reinforces its solitary nature, even while part of a team. Food and care scenes present interesting questions about Mimikyu's biology. The anime shows Mimikyu eating Pokémon food, along with Team Rocket's other Pokémon, but the mechanics of how it consumes food while wearing the costume remain unclear. Does food pass through gaps in the disguise? Does Mimikyu temporarily remove part of the costume in private to eat? The anime doesn't provide answers, maintaining the mystery while establishing that Mimikyu does need sustenance like any other Pokémon. This balance between mundane biological needs and supernatural curse creates an interesting tension in how viewers understand Mimikyu as both creature and curse. Sleep scenes show Mimikyu resting while still wearing its disguise, suggesting either that removing the costume is dangerous even in private, or that Mimikyu simply chooses not to remove it. The idea of Mimikyu sleeping in its costume adds another layer to its existence. There's no moment of relief, no private time where it can exist as itself without the protective layer. The costume is constant, a second skin that never comes off, a barrier between Mimikyu and direct experience of the world. This perpetual separation might contribute to Mimikyu's sense of isolation, unable to interact with anything directly without the costume mediating the contact. The battles against legendary Pokémon, or unusually powerful opponents that appear throughout the anime's Alola arc, occasionally involve Mimikyu. In these fights, Mimikyu's role varies depending on the situation and strategy Team Rocket attempts. Sometimes Mimikyu serves as primary attacker, using its strong ghost and fairy-type moves against opponents weak to those types. Other times, it provides support, using taunt or other status moves to disrupt opponent strategies, while Jessie's other Pokémon attack. These varied roles demonstrate Mimikyu's versatility and Jessie's growing skill at using it effectively in different contexts. Moments where Mimikyu and Pikachu are forced to cooperate due to external threats provide some of the Alola arc's most interesting character beats. Circumstances occasionally arise where Team Rocket and Ash's group must work together against a common enemy. In these situations, Mimikyu and Pikachu fight on the same side, their natural antagonism suspended for the duration of the crisis. These temporary alliances don't resolve Mimikyu's feelings about Pikachu, but they do show that Mimikyu is capable of setting aside its obsession when greater threats require cooperation. The comic relief moments involving Mimikyu balance against its more serious character development. Team Rocket's schemes often fail in humorous ways, and Mimikyu gets caught up in these comedic failures, despite being a legitimately powerful and somewhat tragic Pokémon. This tonal mixing is characteristic of the Pokémon anime, which frequently shifts between genuine emotional moments and lighthearted silliness. Mimikyu's involvement in both types of scenes makes it feel more integrated into the anime's world, rather than existing solely as a vehicle for dark themes. The visual gags involving Mimikyu's costume provide opportunities for humor that doesn't undercut the character's emotional core. The costume getting dirty, torn, or disheveled in non serious ways during travel, or Team Rocket's schemes, adds personality without making light of Mimikyu's actual curse. These moments show Mimikyu dealing with mundane inconveniences that any Pokemon wearing clothing might face, normalizing its situation somewhat while maintaining the underlying tragedy of why it wears the costume in the first place. The broader Pokemon world's reaction to Mimikyu appears occasionally in the anime through background characters or visiting trainers. Most people seem to recognize Mimikyu as a distinct species rather than mistaking it for Pikachu, suggesting that while rare, Mimikyu is known enough that its costume doesn't successfully deceive informed observers. This recognition is a double edged sword for Mimikyu. People knowing it's not Pikachu means the disguise fails its intended purpose, but it also means Mimikyu has its own identity, its own recognition as a species worth knowing about. The tourist and merchant characters in the anime's Alola region sometimes mention Mimikyu in passing, referencing its reputation or noting its appearance in certain locations. These casual references establish that Mimikyu exists as part of Alola's culture and ecology, not just as a character in Ash's story. Locals have knowledge about where Mimikyu can be found, what its behavior patterns are, how to safely interact with one. This background world building makes Mimikyu feel like an authentic part of the Alola region, rather than a narrative convenience. The progression of the Sun and Moon anime's art style, which departed significantly from previous Pokemon anime seasons with more expressive and comedic character designs, affected how Mimikyu was portrayed visually. The more fluid animation allowed for greater range in Mimikyu's movements and expressions despite the costume. The cloth would compress, stretch, and flow in exaggerated ways during action scenes, giving Mimikyu more dynamic presence than the relatively stiff costume might suggest. This animation style made Mimikyu more visually interesting to watch in battles while maintaining the character's core design elements. Special episodes focusing on other characters occasionally included Mimikyu in supporting roles, showing how it interacts with Pokemon and people outside the main cast. These appearances filled out Mimikyu's characterization, showing different facets of its personality in different contexts. How Mimikyu behaves when Team Rocket visits a Pokemon Center differs from how it behaves during schemes or battles. These variations in behavior depending on context make Mimikyu feel more like a real character with different modes of interaction rather than a single note personality. The merchandise tie-ins during the Alola anime's run included Mimikyu prominently, with toys, figures, and collectibles released to coincide with major Mimikyu episodes. These products allowed fans to own pieces of Mimikyu's anime incarnation specifically, distinct from general Mimikyu merchandise. Special edition products like Mimikyu plush dolls with removable costumes or figures depicting specific anime scenes catered to collectors and fans who connected particularly with Mimikyu's anime storyline. The musical themes associated with Mimikyu in the anime's soundtrack reinforced its character. Scenes featuring Mimikyu often included particular musical motifs, minor key melodies that conveyed melancholy or supernatural qualities. These musical cues helped establish mood and atmosphere, making Mimikyu's scenes feel distinct from the generally upbeat tone of the Alola anime. The score supported the narrative without overwhelming it, adding emotional depth through carefully composed background music. Voice acting choices for Mimikyu contributed significantly to how audiences perceived the character. The decision to give Mimikyu a distorted, echoing voice rather than standard Pokemon vocalizations, marked it as different, as something that doesn't fit neatly into normal Pokemon categories. This vocal distinction supported the narrative premise that Mimikyu is cursed, that something about it is fundamentally wrong or dangerous. The voice work added to the overall atmosphere of unease that surrounds Mimikyu even in its cute costume. The translation of Mimikyu's character across different language dubs of the anime maintained its core characteristics while adapting cultural references and wordplay as needed. Voice actors in each language worked to capture Mimikyu's essential nature, its combination of hostility and vulnerability, strength and sadness. The consistency of characterization across dubs demonstrates how universal Mimikyu's themes are, how loneliness and the desire for acceptance transcend cultural and linguistic boundaries. The impact of Mimikyu on the Pokemon trading card game's competitive scene created interesting deck building dynamics. Cards featuring Mimikyu needed to translate its signature disguise ability into TCG mechanics, typically through abilities that prevent damage from the first attack each turn or provide some other form of protection. These card effects made Mimikyu cards valuable in certain deck strategies, useful both for their own abilities and for how they synergized with other cards. Special promotional Mimikyu cards released during events or as tie-ins to anime episodes became collector's items. These limited edition cards often featured unique artwork or holographic effects not available in standard booster packs. The collectability of these special Mimikyu cards created a secondary market where rare versions traded for significant prices among collectors. This economic value attached to Mimikyu cards reflected the character's broader popularity and cultural significance. Tournament viable Mimikyu card strategies evolved as new card sets were released. Players discovered combinations with other Pokemon or trainer cards that made Mimikyu particularly effective in competitive play. The constantly shifting TCG metagame meant Mimikyu cards might be highly played in one format and less viable in another as new cards were introduced or rules changed. This fluctuation kept Mimikyu cards interesting for competitive players, always potentially useful even if not currently dominant. The artwork on various Mimikyu cards ranged from cute to creepy, giving different interpretations of the character's visual identity. Some cards showed Mimikyu in action during battles, costume flowing dynamically as it attacks. Others depicted quieter moments, Mimikyu alone in shadowy locations, emphasizing its solitary nature. Full art cards sometimes included elaborate backgrounds showing Mimikyu in specific locations from the games or anime. This variety in card artwork meant collectors could choose cards that matched their particular interpretation of Mimikyu's character. Deck strategies built around Mimikyu often emphasized disruption and control rather than pure offense. Cards that prevented opponents from playing certain card types or limited their options each turn complemented Mimikyu cards' protective abilities. This strategic approach mirrored Mimikyu's battle tactics in the video games, using its natural resilience to create opportunities for setup and field control. Players who enjoyed technical, strategic gameplay found Mimikyu decks satisfying to pilot in tournament matches. The Pokemon Adventures manga, a popular comic adaptation of the Pokemon games with its own continuity separate from the anime, included Mimikyu in its Alola arc. The manga's darker tone and willingness to explore more mature themes suited Mimikyu's character perfectly. The manga's depiction of Mimikyu emphasized the horror elements of its curse, showing more explicitly the consequences of viewing its true form. This interpretation resonated with older audiences who appreciated the manga's more serious approach to Pokemon storytelling. In the Adventures manga, Mimikyu appeared as a wild Pokemon encountered by main characters during their journey through Alola. The manga's version of Mimikyu displayed intelligence and cunning, actively setting traps and manipulating situations to its advantage. This more antagonistic portrayal differed from the anime's eventually sympathetic Mimikyu, instead presenting the species as genuinely dangerous and somewhat malevolent. The manga's Mimikyu felt more like a traditional ghost story monster, something to be feared rather than pitied. Battles involving Mimikyu in the Adventures manga showcased its abilities with more graphic detail than the anime allowed. Characters injured by Mimikyu's attacks showed visible wounds. The breaking of Mimikyu's disguise was depicted with dramatic panel layouts that emphasized the significance of penetrating its defense. These visual storytelling choices made Mimikyu battles feel higher stakes, more dangerous than typical Pokémon encounters in the manga's narrative. The resolution of Mimikyu's role in the Adventures manga came through understanding rather than violence, but the understanding was reached differently than in the anime. Characters in the manga learned about Mimikyu's curse through research and investigation, piecing together information from Pokemon professors and historical records. This investigative approach suited the manga's more serious tone, treating Mimikyu's nature as a mystery to be solved rather than an emotional journey to be experienced. Fan fiction and fan comics featuring Mimikyu explore aspects of the character that official media leaves ambiguous. Some fan works imagine what Mimikyu's true form might look like, creating various interpretations based on the hints provided by games and anime. Others explore the implications of Mimikyu's curse in greater detail, asking questions about how it affects Mimikyu's daily life and interactions. Still others create alternate universe scenarios where Mimikyu's curse is lifted or never existed, exploring how its personality might develop under different circumstances. The therapeutic and healing potential of Mimikyu's story has been recognized by fans who create content addressing mental health themes. Fan works compare Mimikyu's disguise to masking behaviors associated with autism or other neurodivergent conditions. Others use Mimikyu as a metaphor for depression or anxiety, the curse representing mental illness that makes the sufferer feel they must hide their true self from others. These fan-created interpretations add layers of meaning to Mimikyu beyond what official sources intended, demonstrating how powerful characters can take on significance beyond their original conception. Crossover fan art, placing Mimikyu in other fictional universes or alongside characters from different franchises, remains popular across fan communities. These crossovers often play with the concept of Mimikyu's disguise, imagining what it might dress as in different contexts. Mimikyu wearing costumes imitating characters from other popular franchises creates humor while maintaining the core concept of a creature that hides behind beloved images to gain acceptance. The flexibility of this concept allows endless creative variations. Cosplay featuring Mimikyu presents interesting challenges and opportunities for fans. Creating a Mimikyu costume requires replicating its handmade, imperfect aesthetic accurately, which means making a costume that deliberately looks roughly made. Cosplayers approach this challenge in various ways, some creating highly detailed, rough costumes, and others embracing actual rough construction as appropriate to the character. The meta nature of wearing a costume of a character wearing a costume adds another layer of interpretation to Mimikyu cosplay. Group cosplays featuring multiple Mimikyu, sometimes alongside Pikachu cosplayers, create interesting photo opportunities that play with Mimikyu's relationship to Pikachu. These group efforts might tell visual stories, showing Mimikyu variants approaching or surrounding Pikachu, or show different interpretations of Mimikyu's costume in various states of repair or wearing different expressions. The collaborative nature of group Mimikyu cosplays builds community among fans who connect with the character. Fan music projects ranging from original songs to remixes of Mimikyu's official theme explore the character through audio media. Some songs focus on Mimikyu's sadness and isolation, using minor keys and melancholic melodies to evoke emotional responses. Others take more upbeat approaches, celebrating Mimikyu's strength and eventual acceptance. The variety in musical interpretation reflects the multifaceted nature of Mimikyu's appeal, resonating with different people for different reasons. Animation fan projects create unofficial Mimikyu content, including animated music videos, short films, and animated comic dubs. These fan animations allow creators to explore Mimikyu stories that official media hasn't told, filling gaps in the character's narrative or creating entirely original scenarios. The quality of these fan animations varies widely, from simple animatics to fully produced short films with professional level animation and voice acting. Regardless of production quality, these projects demonstrate passionate engagement with Mimikyu as a character worth creating new stories about. Academic analysis of Mimikyu has appeared in scholarly contexts, examining video games, anime, and popular culture. Essays and papers discuss Mimikyu as example of effective character design, analyzing how its visual appearance communicates its narrative role. Other academic work examines Mimikyu through critical theory lenses, applying concepts from disability studies, queer theory, or psychoanalysis to understand what the character represents. This scholarly attention demonstrates that Mimikyu has achieved cultural significance beyond simple popularity, becoming a text worthy of serious analytical engagement. The influence of Mimikyu on subsequent Pokémon designs can be seen in later generations, though no Pokémon has precisely replicated Mimikyu's specific concept. Several newer ghost types share thematic elements with Mimikyu, exploring loneliness, disguise, or the gap between appearance and reality. These spiritual successors don't replace Mimikyu, but expand on similar themes, showing that Game Freak recognized the resonance of Mimikyu's core concept and wanted to explore related ideas in different contexts. The longevity of Mimikyu's popularity years after its initial introduction demonstrates that it's not merely a temporary trend, but a character with lasting appeal. New fans continue discovering Mimikyu through various entry points, whether playing older Pokemon games, watching anime episodes, or encountering Mimikyu content online. Each new fan generation brings fresh interpretations and perspectives to the character, keeping Mimikyu relevant and discussed within Pokemon communities. Mimikyu's role in introducing people to Pokemon who might not otherwise engage with the franchise represents an interesting outreach phenomenon. Some people who aren't typically interested in Pokemon connect with Mimikyu specifically, drawn by its darker themes or emotional depth. This gateway effect brings new audiences to Pokemon, expanding the franchise's reach beyond its traditional demographic. Mimikyu serves as proof that Pokemon can tell sophisticated stories and create complex characters while maintaining its family-friendly identity. The question of whether Game Freak will ever reveal Mimikyu's true form in official media remains open. Some fans desperately want to see what lies beneath the costume, believing revelation would provide closure or satisfy curiosity. Others argue that showing Mimikyu's true form would undermine the character's mystery and appeal, making concrete something more powerful when left to imagination. This debate reflects broader discussions about mystery in storytelling, when revelation serves narrative purposes and when maintaining ambiguity creates stronger impact. If Mimikyu's true form is eventually revealed, it would need to satisfy years of speculation and imagination while remaining true to the character's established lore. The form would need to be something that justifies Mimikyu's curse, something that explains why viewing it causes such severe reactions. Whatever design Game Freak might create would inevitably disappoint some fans while exciting others, as no single design could match every individual interpretation that has developed over years of mystery. This creative challenge might be why revelation hasn't happened, the risk of disappointing expectations outweighs potential benefits of satisfying curiosity. The alternative to revealing Mimikyu's form is continuing to explore its character through stories that respect the mystery while adding new dimensions to its personality and relationships. Future games or anime appearances could show Mimikyu forming new bonds, facing different challenges, or growing in ways that don't require removing its disguise. This approach allows Mimikyu to develop as a character without sacrificing the core mystery that defines it. Growth through relationship and experience, rather than physical revelation, maintains what makes Mimikyu special while allowing new stories to be told. Speculation about potential Mimikyu regional variants or related Pokémon species continues within fan communities. What would a Mimikyu from another region dress as if not Pikachu? Would it choose whatever Pokémon is most popular in that specific region, or would it still default to Pikachu due to Pikachu's global recognition? These questions generate creative fan designs, imagining Mimikyu variants wearing costumes of different Pokémon, each interpretation adding something new while maintaining the core concept of a cursed creature hiding behind a friendly disguise. The potential for a Mimikyu evolution or pre-evolution has been discussed extensively by fans. An evolution might represent Mimikyu overcoming its curse or becoming powerful enough that the disguise is no longer necessary. A pre-evolution could show a younger Mimikyu before it learned to create its costume, perhaps more innocent, but also more dangerous as it hasn't yet learned to protect others from its true form. Either addition would change Mimikyu's narrative significance, transforming it from a standalone tragedy into part of a larger developmental arc. However, the lack of official evolutions or pre-evolutions for Mimikyu might be intentional, part of what makes the character work. Mimikyu's story is about being stuck, unable to change or grow in the ways that would resolve its fundamental problem. Adding evolution would suggest the possibility of overcoming the curse, which might undermine the tragic nature that makes Mimikyu emotionally resonant. Sometimes, the most powerful characters are those who cannot change their fundamental nature, who must instead find ways to live with unchangeable circumstances. The enduring presence of Mimikyu in Pokémon discourse, its continued relevance in discussions about effective character design and emotional storytelling, demonstrates that Game Freak created something that transcends typical video game creature design. Mimikyu exists as a character in the fullest sense, with internal life, emotional complexity, and narrative arc that engages audiences beyond simple aesthetic appeal or gameplay functionality. This achievement in character creation, within the constraints of a family-friendly creature collection game, represents significant creative success. The care taken in every aspect of Mimikyu's presentation, from visual design to mechanical implementation to narrative integration, shows thoughtful development, guided by clear creative vision. Nothing about Mimikyu feels accidental or unconsidered. Each element serves the whole, contributing to a character that functions simultaneously as cute mascot, tragic figure, competitive battler, and cultural phenomenon. This multidimensional success is rare, requiring both initial inspiration and sustained execution across multiple media and contexts. Mimikyu's story resonates because it touches on universal human experiences through the metaphor of a cursed Pokémon. Everyone has felt inadequate, has wished they could be someone else, has hidden parts of themselves out of fear of rejection. Mimikyu takes these common experiences and embodies them in a character that's both specific to Pokemon's fantasy world and broadly relatable to anyone who has struggled with self-acceptance. This balance between fantasy and reality, between specific world building and universal themes, defines effective fictional characters across all media. The acceptance Mimikyu eventually finds through Team Rocket in the anime provides hopeful resolution without being unrealistically simple. Mimikyu doesn't magically overcome its curse or suddenly become confident in its true appearance. Instead, it learns that acceptance comes from being valued as yourself rather than as the image you project. Team Rocket loves Mimikyu while knowing exactly what it is, disguise and all. This conditional acceptance, where the disguise is acknowledged rather than ignored or stripped away, models healthy acceptance of people who cannot or choose not to present themselves in conventional ways. The relationship between Mimikyu and its trainer, whether Jesse in the anime or the player in the games, represents partnership built on understanding rather than ignorance. The trainer knows what Mimikyu is and accepts the responsibility and potential danger that comes with that knowledge. Mimikyu knows the trainer understands and chooses to stay anyway. This mutual knowledge and choice creates bonds stronger than simple affection, a connection built on honest awareness of each other's nature. Looking at Mimikyu's complete story across games, anime, manga, and fan interpretations creates a remarkably rich and complex picture of a single character. From design concept to competitive battler to emotional arc to cultural icon, Mimikyu succeeds on every level. It works mechanically in gameplay, resonates emotionally in narrative contexts, generates discussion and creativity in fan communities, and maintains relevance years after introduction. Few Pokemon achieve this level of comprehensive success across all dimensions of the franchise's multimedia presence. The future of Mimikyu within Pokemon franchise remains unwritten. Future games will likely continue, including Mimikyu in some capacity, whether as catchable Pokemon in new regions or as challenger in special events. The anime might bring Mimikyu back for cameo appearances or new story arcs if circumstances align. Merchandise will continue featuring Mimikyu as long as demand exists. The character has secured its place in Pokemon's pantheon, moving beyond trendy newcomer to established part of the franchise's identity. What Mimikyu represents, both within Pokemon's fiction and in broader cultural context, matters more than any specific future appearance. It represents the possibility of finding acceptance despite being different, despite being cursed, despite wearing a disguise. It represents the courage required to keep trying to connect with others, even after rejection. It represents the sadness of feeling you can never be good enough as you are, and the hope that somewhere, someone will value you anyway. These themes transcend Pokemon, speaking to anyone who has ever felt like they don't quite fit in, like they're hiding behind a mask, like they're pursuing an ideal they can never achieve. The disguised Pokemon that wanted to be loved stands as testament to thoughtful character creation and emotional honesty in game design. Mimikyu's complete story, from its introduction through its anime arc and its lasting cultural impact, demonstrates that even within mass market entertainment, there's room for complex characters dealing with real emotional struggles. Sometimes, the most memorable creatures are not the strongest or the most conventionally appealing, but those that express something true about the experience of being alive, of wanting connection, of learning to accept yourself while hoping others will accept you too. The technical aspects of implementing Mimikyu in the games required careful programming to ensure the disguise ability functioned correctly across all battle scenarios. Game Freak's developers needed to account for situations where multiple forms of damage might occur simultaneously, where weather effects or status conditions might interact unexpectedly with the ability, where switching mechanics could create edge cases. The code underlying Mimikyu's signature ability represents significant engineering work, translating a thematic concept into reliable game mechanics that work consistently across millions of player experiences. Testing phases for Mimikyu likely involved extensive battle simulations to identify potential exploits or bugs related to the disguise ability. Quality assurance teams would have played through numerous scenarios, attempting to break the ability through unusual move combinations or situational factors. This thorough testing ensures that when players encounter Mimikyu Whether in the wild or in competitive battles, the experience functions as intended without game-breaking glitches or exploitable loopholes. The reliability of Mimikyu's mechanics reflects this careful development process. The animation work required to bring Mimikyu to life across multiple games involved creating sprites or models that effectively conveyed its costume nature while maintaining visual appeal. In two-dimensional sprite-based games, animators needed to show fabric movement and costume flexibility within the constraints of pixel art. In three-dimensional games, modelers created a mesh that could deform appropriately while maintaining the handmade aesthetic that defines Mimikyu's appearance. Both approaches required artistic skill and technical knowledge to execute successfully. The transition between Mimikyu's intact disguise form and its broken disguise form needed to feel impactful in battle without being jarring or confusing. Animation teams developed transition animations showing the costume tilting or drooping when disguise breaks, providing clear visual feedback that the ability has been consumed. This clarity helps players understand the current state of their Mimikyu at a glance, important information for making strategic decisions in the heat of battle. The visual communication of game state through character design and animation represents sophisticated interface design disguised as aesthetic choice. Sound design for Mimikyu contributed significantly to its unsettling yet appealing character. The voice clips used for Mimikyu's cry in the games needed to sound distinctive enough to be immediately recognizable while fitting the ghost and fairy type combination. Sound designers created vocalizations that have an echoing hollow quality, suggesting voice emanating from inside a costume rather than from a visible mouth. These audio cues work with visual design to create a cohesive character that engages multiple senses. Battle sound effects for Mimikyu's moves required consideration of both the move itself and Mimikyu's character. When Mimikyu uses Shadow Claw, the sound combines the typical ghost-type move audio with additional elements suggesting fabric rustling or cloth moving rapidly. Play Rough incorporates sounds that match the sparkly, energetic visual effects while maintaining enough edge to remind players this is still a ghost-type Pokémon despite its cute appearance. These layered sound effects add depth to battles, making each Pokémon's moves feel unique rather than generic. The musical themes associated with locations where Mimikyu can be encountered set appropriate atmospheric tone. The abandoned Megamart on Route 15 in Alola has a deliberately eerie musical theme featuring minor keys and sparse instrumentation that creates feelings of isolation and decay. This musical choice prepares players emotionally for encounters with Pokémon like Mimikyu that exist in forgotten spaces. The soundtrack works with environmental design to tell stories without dialogue, establishing mood through carefully composed audio. Localization teams faced interesting challenges adapting Mimikyu's name and characterization for different languages and cultures. The name Mimikyu works in English as a play on mimic and you, suggesting both imitation and personalization. Translators needed to create names in other languages that captured similar wordplay while remaining pronounceable and memorable. Different regions received names that reflect local language patterns while maintaining connection to the original Japanese name and concept. The German name Mimigma combines elements suggesting mimicry with stigma, adding a layer of meaning about social rejection that fits Mimikyu's character. The French name Mimikyu plays with similar sounds to the English version while adapting to French phonetics. Each localized name represents careful consideration of how to preserve character essence across linguistic and cultural boundaries. This attention to localization ensures Mimikyu resonates with players worldwide, not just those who speak Japanese or English. Cultural references within Mimikyu's design required different handling in various regions. The Pikachu costume is universally recognizable due to Pikachu's global popularity, making that aspect of Mimikyu's design easy to localize. However, certain thematic elements rooted in Japanese folklore or cultural attitudes toward ghosts and curses needed contextualization for international audiences. Localization teams added explanatory text in Pokédex entries or adjusted dialogue to ensure players from all backgrounds could understand Mimikyu's significance. The Pokémon Company International's marketing of Mimikyu adjusted messaging for different regional audiences while maintaining core character appeal. Western marketing emphasized the cute, creepy contrast, positioning Mimikyu as perfect for fans who liked Halloween aesthetics or slightly darker Pokémon. Japanese marketing leaned more heavily into the emotional tragedy of Mimikyu's story, highlighting themes of loneliness and the desire for acceptance. These regional marketing differences reflect cultural variations in what aspects of characters resonate most strongly with different audiences. Mimikyu's appearance in mobile applications beyond Pokemon Go expanded its presence across the digital ecosystem. Pokemon Shuffle, a puzzle game, included Mimikyu as a capturable Pokemon with abilities relevant to that game's mechanics. Pokemon Duel, a strategy board game app, featured Mimikyu as a playable figure with movement and attack patterns, translating its battle capabilities into the duel format. These appearances across multiple game types kept Mimikyu visible to players who engaged with Pokemon through different platforms and genres. The integration of Mimikyu into Pokemon Masters EX, a mobile game focusing on trainer and Pokemon partnerships, paired Mimikyu with Acerola, a trial captain from Alola who specializes in ghost types. This pairing created new story content exploring the relationship between Mimikyu and its trainer in the Master's continuity. Dialogue and story beats specific to this pairing added layers to Mimikyu's character, showing how it interacts with a trainer who understands and appreciates ghost types specifically. Acerola's characterization as a friendly, cheerful person who specializes in ghost types creates interesting dynamic with Mimikyu. She treats Mimikyu with affection and respect, never showing fear or discomfort around it. This acceptance from someone who genuinely loves ghost-type Pokemon for what they are, rather than despite what they are, provides Mimikyu with a different kind of validation than it received from Team Rocket in the anime. Acerola's expertise means she knows exactly what Mimikyu is and chooses to partner with it because of that knowledge, not in spite of it. The story content in Pokemon Masters EX allows players to see Mimikyu participating in team activities, training alongside other ghost types, and developing bonds with Pokemon from different regions and generations. These interactions show Mimikyu as part of a community of ghost-type Pokemon, each with their own tragic or unusual origins. Seeing Mimikyu among other ghosts normalizes its existence somewhat, suggesting that within the subsets of ghost types, Mimikyu's curse and disguise aren't as unusual as they might seem among Pokemon generally. The gacha mechanics of Pokemon Masters EX mean obtaining Acerola and Mimikyu requires either luck or significant investment of in-game currency. This rarity mirrors Mimikyu's scarcity in mainline games, maintaining its special status even in a game with hundreds of available trainer and Pokemon pairs. Players who successfully obtain Mimikyu in Masters often express excitement and satisfaction, the difficulty of acquisition making the reward feel more meaningful when finally achieved. Battle mechanics in Pokemon Masters EX adapt Mimikyu's abilities to the game's 3 versus 3 sync battle format. Mimikyu's moves are translated into actions appropriate for real-time cooperative battling, requiring quick decision-making and coordination with other players. The disguise ability functions differently than in mainline games, adapted to Master's unique battle system while maintaining the spirit of providing Mimikyu with protective resilience that defines its combat identity. Customization options in various Pokemon games sometimes include Mimikyu themed items or cosmetics. Player characters might wear Mimikyu themed clothing or accessories, decorating their avatar with items inspired by the disguised ghost. Decorative items for secret bases or player homes might include Mimikyu plush toys or posters. These cosmetic options allow players to express their appreciation for Mimikyu within the game world, signaling to other players their fondness for this particular Pokemon. Photo mode features in recent Pokemon games enable players to capture images of their Mimikyu in various poses and locations. These photo opportunities create shareable content that players post to social media, spreading Mimikyu's image and character beyond the immediate context of gameplay. Photo mode compositions might show Mimikyu in humorous situations, dramatic battle poses, or quiet moments that emphasize its solitary nature. The variety in player created Mimikyu photos demonstrates the character's versatility as photographic subject. The Pokemon Snap series, games focused entirely on photography of Pokemon in their natural habitats, could potentially include Mimikyu in future installments. Imagining how Mimikyu might behave in its environment when observed but not directly engaged creates interesting possibilities. Would it hide from the camera, afraid of having its photo taken? Would it pose, hoping to be captured looking its best? Would it attempt to sabotage photos, not wanting evidence of its existence to spread? Each possibility offers different insights into Mimikyu's psychology and relationship with being observed. Documentary style content within Pokemon games sometimes provides information about Pokemon species through in game naturalists or researchers. These fictional documentaries treat Pokemon as real animals being studied, discussing their behaviors, habitats, and ecological roles. A documentary about Mimikyu within this framework might explore questions like how do Mimikyu obtain the materials for their costumes? Do they compete for territory? What do they eat, and how do they hunt? These naturalistic questions add dimension to Mimikyu as a living creature rather than purely a narrative device. The ecological role of Mimikyu within Alola's ecosystem remains somewhat ambiguous. As a ghost type, it's unclear whether Mimikyu needs to eat in the conventional sense or sustains itself through supernatural means. Ghost types often occupy strange positions in Pokemon ecology, neither fully alive nor fully dead, existing in states that defy normal biological categorization. Mimikyu fits this pattern, a creature whose existence raises questions about what it means to be alive in the Pokemon world. Predator-prey relationships involving Mimikyu are difficult to establish given its curse. What Pokemon would risk hunting something whose true form can cause death or severe illness? The curse might serve as perfect defense mechanism, ensuring Mimikyu has no natural predators, because attacking it is simply too dangerous. This would make Mimikyu an apex predator of sorts, not through strength or ferocity, but through the passive defense of its deadly true form. The ecological implications of a predator that cannot be safely hunted create interesting hypothetical dynamics. Conversely, what does Mimikyu prey upon? Its ghost typing suggests it might feed on emotions or life force rather than physical matter, a common trait among ghost-type Pokemon. The fact that Mimikyu seeks connection with other beings might relate to its feeding habits. Perhaps it sustains itself through proximity to living creatures, drawing energy from their presence. This would make its isolation and disguise doubly tragic. The thing it needs to survive requires it to be near others, but its true form drives them away. The reproduction and life cycle of Mimikyu species remains mysterious. Do Mimikyu reproduce like living Pokemon or manifest like spirits? If they reproduce conventionally, how do Mimikyu offspring first discover they need to wear disguises? Is there parental teaching, or does each young Mimikyu independently realize its true form is dangerous? The mechanics of Mimikyu reproduction and development open numerous questions that games and anime deliberately leave unanswered, maintaining the species' mysterious nature. The possibility of regional variants or subspecies of Mimikyu existing in other parts of the Pokemon world has been explored in fan speculation and could be addressed in future games. A Galarian Mimikyu might dress as something other than Pikachu, perhaps imitating whatever Pokemon is most beloved in the Galar region. The costume would be similarly handmade and imperfect, but the specific Pokemon being imitated would differ based on local culture and preferences. This concept allows Mimikyu's core idea to adapt to different regional contexts while maintaining its essential character. The weather patterns in Alola affect Mimikyu's habitat and behavior in ways that attentive players might notice. During rain, Mimikyu might seek shelter to protect its cloth costume from getting soaked and heavy. Bright sunshine might drive Mimikyu deeper into shadowy areas, avoiding harsh light that makes it more visible and exposes the costume's imperfections. These environmental responses, whether explicitly programmed into games or imagined by players, add to the sense of Mimikyu as a creature adapted to specific living conditions. The time of day affects when and where Mimikyu appears in games with day-night cycles. Mimikyu is more commonly encountered during evening or night hours, avoiding the bright midday when its costume and secretive nature would be most exposed. This nocturnal preference aligns with its ghost typing and reinforces its characterization as a creature that lurks in shadows, emerging only when conditions provide cover and concealment. The behavioral programming that governs Mimikyu's spawn patterns reflects thoughtful world building that treats it as more than just data to be encountered. Seasonal changes in games that implement seasonal mechanics might affect Mimikyu's appearance or behavior. Winter's shorter days and longer nights could increase Mimikyu spawns, taking advantage of extended darkness. Spring and summer, with their longer days, might see Mimikyu retreating further into abandoned buildings or deep forests where shadows persist even at noon. These seasonal patterns, whether implemented in games or imagined by players familiar with Mimikyu's character, create sense of Mimikyu as responsive to its environment. The interaction between Mimikyu and various terrain types in battle creates strategic considerations beyond simple type matchups. Electric terrain boosts electric type moves, potentially making Pikachu encounters more dangerous for Mimikyu from a narrative perspective. Misty terrain prevents status conditions, protecting Mimikyu from burns or paralysis that would hinder its offensive capabilities. Grassy terrain heals Pokemon each turn, though this benefit is less significant for Mimikyu given its middling HP stat. Understanding these terrain interactions adds depth to competitive Mimikyu play. The breeding mechanics for obtaining optimal Mimikyu involve understanding inheritance patterns for stats, nature, and moves. Egg moves that Mimikyu can learn through breeding include Curse, which has interesting thematic resonance given Mimikyu's cursed nature. Destiny Bond, another breedable move, allows Mimikyu to take down an opponent with it if knocked out, reflecting the danger inherent in confronting this disguised ghost. These egg moves provide additional strategic options for players willing to invest time in breeding perfect Mimikyu. The process of hatching a Mimikyu egg raises interesting narrative questions. Does the newly hatched Mimikyu already wear a disguise, suggesting the costume is somehow biological despite appearing handmade? Or does the baby Mimikyu lack a disguise initially, requiring it to create one before it can safely interact with others? Games don't clarify this detail, and both interpretations have compelling implications for understanding Mimikyu's nature. The ambiguity allows players to construct their own headcanon about Mimikyu biology and development. The relationship between Mimikyu and other ghost type Pokemon in player teams creates interesting party dynamics. Teaming Mimikyu with Pokemon like Gengar, Chandelure, or Aegislash creates a ghost type focused team with thematic coherence and strategic synergy. Each ghost type brings different strengths and covers different weaknesses, allowing for flexible team building that maintains type consistency. The narrative of having multiple ghost types working together also creates interesting imagined dynamics about how these different spectral beings interact. Type coverage considerations mean Mimikyu often appears on teams alongside Pokemon that cover its weaknesses to Ghost and Steel type attacks. Water types that resist steel moves, or dark types immune to psychic attacks that often accompany ghost types, provide defensive synergy. Fighting types that threaten steel types with super effective attacks offer offensive coverage. Building a balanced team around Mimikyu requires thinking about both mechanical interactions and how to protect your disguised ghost from threats it cannot safely confront alone. The role of Mimikyu in specific team archetypes influences how it's used strategically. In hyper-offensive teams that aim to overwhelm opponents with powerful attacks, Mimikyu serves as a setup sweeper, using its guaranteed disguise, turn to boost with Sword's Dance. In balanced teams that mix offense and defense, Mimikyu might play a more conservative role, using its bulk and typing to check specific threats while providing offensive pressure when opportunities arise. Understanding team archetypes as helps players use Mimikyu more effectively in competitive contexts. The psychological warfare aspect of Mimikyu battles comes from opponent uncertainty about what Mimikyu will do with its free turn. Will it attack immediately to damage a key opponent? Will it set up Sword's Dance to prepare a sweep? Will it use a status move to disrupt opponent's strategy? This uncertainty forces opponents to make difficult predictions, and wrong guesses can cost them the match. The mind games inherent in Mimikyu play add a psychological dimension beyond pure mechanical execution. The adaptation of Mimikyu's character for different media required translators and adapters to maintain core elements while adjusting for medium-specific constraints. The manga had more freedom to explore dark themes than the anime, allowing for more explicit depiction of Mimikyu's curse and its effects. Light novels could delve into internal monologue, giving readers direct access to Mimikyu's thoughts and feelings. Each medium's strengths and limitations shaped how Mimikyu's story was told, creating variations that complement rather than contradict each other. The differences between Mimikyu's portrayal across media create a more complete picture when viewed together. The games provide mechanical grounding and basic lore. The anime adds emotional depth and character development. The manga explores darker implications and more mature themes. Fan works fill gaps and explore possibilities official media leaves open. This multimedia approach to character building creates richness that single medium presentations couldn't achieve, making Mimikyu feel fully realized across multiple interpretive lenses. The intellectual property considerations surrounding Mimikyu affect how it can be used commercially. The Pokémon Company holds trademark and copyright for Mimikyu's design and name, controlling how it appears in official merchandise and media. This legal framework protects Mimikyu from unauthorized commercial use while allowing fan creation under certain circumstances. Understanding these IP boundaries helps explain why certain types of Mimikyu content exist while others don't. The legal and commercial structures that govern how characters are used and monetized. The decision to make Mimikyu a standalone Pokémon rather than part of an evolution family affects its long-term viability and relevance. Without evolution, Mimikyu doesn't become obsolete when its evolved form is discovered. Players don't need to feel they're wasting resources by using Mimikyu in its current state rather than evolving it into something stronger. This design choice ensures Mimikyu remains the focus of player attention rather than being viewed as a stepping stone to something else. However, the lack of evolution also means Mimikyu cannot grow stronger through evolution in ways that many Pokemon can. Its base stats are fixed, limiting its competitive ceiling. Players cannot look forward to Mimikyu achieving a more powerful form that resolves its internal struggles narratively through evolutionary transformation. This limitation reinforces Mimikyu's tragic nature. It is trapped in its current state with no natural path to growth or change. A thematic choice that serves the character even as it creates mechanical constraints. The possibility of Mimikyu receiving regional evolution in future games, where existing Pokemon gain new evolved forms under specific conditions in new regions, remains theoretically possible. Such an evolution could represent Mimikyu overcoming aspects of its curse or finding new ways to cope with its condition. However, implementing this would require careful narrative and mechanical balance to avoid undermining what makes Mimikyu appealing in its current form. An evolution that resolves Mimikyu's tragedy might satisfy some fans while disappointing others who appreciate the bittersweet nature of its unchangeable situation. The comparison between Mimikyu and other disguise-based Pokemon like Zoroark, which uses illusions to appear as other Pokemon, highlights different approaches to similar concepts. Zoroark's illusion ability is tactical deception, a tool for gaining battlefield advantage. Mimikyu's disguise is existential necessity, a barrier between itself and a world that cannot safely perceive its true form. The mechanical similarity between these abilities disguises fundamentally different narrative purposes, showing how game mechanics can serve diverse storytelling goals. The thematic exploration of identity and self-presentation in Mimikyu resonates with discussions around authenticity and persona in contemporary culture. Social media age discourse about presenting curated versions of ourselves online parallels Mimikyu's carefully constructed disguise. In small, the question of whether we can truly be known by others when we carefully control what we reveal connects to Mimikyu's struggle to find acceptance while hiding its true form. These contemporary resonances explain part of why Mimikyu feels relevant to modern audiences, despite existing in a fantasy context. The use of Mimikyu in educational contexts as a teaching tool for discussing emotions, identity, and acceptance demonstrates the character's utility beyond entertainment. Teachers and counselors have used Mimikyu to help children discuss feelings of inadequacy or fear of rejection in age-appropriate ways. The metaphor of wearing a disguise to fit in provides accessible entry point for conversations about authenticity and self-acceptance. Mimikyu's ultimate lesson, that true acceptance comes from being valued as yourself, offers healthy framework for discussing self-worth. The therapeutic applications of Mimikyu extend to art therapy and creative expression exercises. Participants might be asked to imagine what their own disguise would look like if they wore one like Mimikyu, externalizing feelings about how they present themselves to the world. Creating these imaginary disguises and discussing why they chose specific elements provides insight into self-perception and social anxiety. The framework Mimikyu provides makes these psychological explorations feel playful rather than threatening, lowering defenses that might prevent honest self-examination. The journaling prompts inspired by Mimikyu encourage reflection on themes of authenticity and acceptance. Questions like, when do you feel you're wearing a disguise? Or, who in your life sees you without your disguise? Prompt self-examination using Mimikyu's story as reference point. These exercises use fictional character to create safe distance for exploring potentially difficult personal topics, the abstraction making it easier to approach feelings that might be overwhelming if confronted directly. The community events and gatherings centered around Mimikyu create spaces for fans to connect over shared appreciation. Mimikyu meetups at conventions or Pokemon Go community days provide opportunities for people who identify with the character to find each other. These gatherings often have welcoming, inclusive atmospheres, recognizing that many Mimikyu fans connect with themes of isolation and the desire for acceptance. The community formed around Mimikyu reflects the character's core themes, people finding connection through shared understanding of what Mimikyu represents. The charity initiatives and fundraising efforts using Mimikyu demonstrate how popular characters can be leveraged for social good. Charity auctions featuring rare Mimikyu merchandise or artist created Mimikyu works raise money for causes related to mental health, anti bullying, or support for neurodivergent individuals. These charitable applications align with Mimikyu's themes, using the character's popularity to support people dealing with issues Mimikyu's story metaphorically addresses. The character becomes a symbol not just of struggle, but of community support and mutual aid. The evolution of fan interpretation of Mimikyu over time shows how character understanding deepens with sustained engagement. Initial reactions focused on Mimikyu's cute, creepy aesthetic and its hatred of Pikachu in the anime. Deeper engagement thus revealed layers of tragedy, themes of identity and acceptance, psychological complexity that rewards analysis. This progression from surface appreciation to deeper understanding mirrors many people's relationship with media, initial attraction based on aesthetics or novelty developing into genuine emotional investment as character depth becomes apparent. The academic conferences and panels discussing Mimikyu within contexts of game studies, anime analysis, or cultural studies validate its significance as object worthy of serious examination. Scholars present papers analyzing Mimikyu through various theoretical frameworks, contributing to academic discourse while demonstrating that popular media texts deserve rigorous intellectual engagement. These academic treatments of Mimikyu legitimize fan interpretations that have long recognized the character's depth, bringing a scholarly language to observations fans have been making since Mimikyu's introduction. The archival efforts to preserve Mimikyu related content ensure that fan creations and community responses remain accessible for future researchers and fans. Digital archives collect fan art, fan fiction, cosplay photos, and discussion threads, creating comprehensive record of how Mimikyu was received and interpreted. These archives document cultural moment, showing what themes and aspects of Mimikyu resonated most strongly with audiences at different points in time. The preservation work ensures that even if interest in Mimikyu eventually wanes, the historical record of its cultural impact remains available. The restoration and preservation of official Mimikyu content, including game data, anime episodes, and promotional materials, protects these works for future access. Digital preservation ensures that even as technology changes and platforms become obsolete, Mimikyu's official appearances remain viewable and playable. This archival work benefits not just fans wanting to revisit Mimikyu content, but also researchers studying the evolution of Pokémon franchise or game design across console generations. The legacy of Mimikyu within Pokémon franchise goes beyond any single appearance or medium. It demonstrated that Pokémon characters could tackle complex emotional themes while remaining accessible to all ages. It showed that creature designs could be simultaneously cute and unsettling, tragic and hopeful, popular and artistically ambitious. It proved that mechanical innovation through abilities like disguise could serve thematic purposes while creating interesting gameplay. These lessons influenced how Game Freak and the Pokémon Company approach character creation in subsequent generations. The influence of Mimikyu on fan expectations altered what audiences look for in new Pokémon reveals. There's increased interest in Pokemon with complex backstories or unusual concepts that subvert expectations. Ghost types in particular face implicit comparison to Mimikyu, measured against the standard it set for emotionally resonant ghost type designs. This heightened expectation pushes creators to develop more thoughtful designs, raising the overall quality bar for new Pokemon introductions. The cultural conversations sparked by Mimikyu about representation, identity, and acceptance in gaming spaces demonstrate characters' potential to create meaningful discourse. Mimikyu's story facilitated discussions about making space for those who feel different, about the damage caused by impossible beauty or likability standards, about the value of authentic self expression. These conversations extended beyond Pokemon fandom into broader gaming and media criticism, using Mimikyu as case study for how representation and thematic depth can coexist with commercial viability. The enduring mystery of what lies beneath Mimikyu's disguise continues generating speculation and creative interpretation. Every fan has their own theory, their own mental image of Mimikyu's true form. Some imagine something fundamentally horrifying, justifying the deadly curse. Others picture something sad and vulnerable, suggesting the curse is about perceived ugliness rather than objective horror. Still others theorize there might be nothing beneath the costume, that Mimikyu is the curse itself given form, haunting empty cloth. The unresolved nature of this central mystery keeps Mimikyu perpetually intriguing, always inviting new interpretations. The decision to maintain Mimikyu's mystery rather than resolving it reflects understanding that some questions generate more engagement unanswered than answered. The speculation, the theories, the creative attempts to imagine the unimaginable, all of this constitutes active engagement with the character that would cease if definitive answer was provided. Mystery creates space for imagination, allowing each person to fill gaps with their own ideas. This participatory element makes Mimikyu feel personal to each fan in ways that fully explained characters cannot achieve. The balance between providing enough information to understand Mimikyu and withholding enough to maintain mystery represents skilled storytelling. We know Mimikyu's motivations, its feelings, its struggle with self acceptance. We understand the mechanics of its curse and the practical implications of its disguise. What we don't know is the specific nature of what's being hidden, that one detail that would transform understanding from abstract to concrete. The careful calibration of revelation and concealment makes Mimikyu's story satisfying while remaining intriguing. The emotional journey players and viewers experience with Mimikyu follows predictable pattern that speaks to effective character writing. Initial reaction is often focused on visual novelty, recognition of Mimikyu as unusual or interesting looking. Deeper engagement reveals the sadness of its situation, generating sympathy and emotional investment. Understanding its growth toward self acceptance creates satisfaction, feeling of narrative completion, even though Mimikyu's circumstances haven't fundamentally changed. This emotional arc works because it mirrors real psychological growth, external situation remaining difficult, but internal relationship to that situation evolving toward health. The hope embedded in Mimikyu's story, despite its tragic elements, provides emotional balance that prevents the character from feeling oppressively dark. Mimikyu finds people who accept it. It learns that it has value beyond resembling Pikachu. It discovers that connection is possible even while wearing the disguise. These hopeful elements keep Mimikyu's story from being pure tragedy, offering instead a more nuanced portrait of living with unchangeable difficult circumstances. The message is not that curses can always be broken, but that meaningful life remains possible even when cursed. The representation of disability through Mimikyu's curse, whether intentional or not, provides valuable narrative that many people with disabilities or chronic illnesses recognize. The experience of having a body or mind that others find uncomfortable, of needing accommodations or barriers to participate in normal social interactions, of wanting acceptance while knowing you're seen as fundamentally different. These experiences resonate in Mimikyu's story. The character validates these feelings while offering hopeful narrative about finding acceptance and community despite difference. The neurodivergence reading of Mimikyu focuses on masking, the practice many neurodivergent people use to appear more neurotypical in social situations. Masking is exhausting, requires constant effort, and creates barrier between one's authentic self and how one presents to the world. Mimikyu's disguise functions as perfect metaphor for masking, and Mimikyu's discovery that Team Rocket accepts it while knowing the disguise as a disguise parallels neurodivergent people finding spaces where masking isn't necessary. These readings add depth to Mimikyu interpretation while providing representation that speaks to real lived experiences. The queer readings of Mimikyu examine themes of closeting, performing identities to gain social acceptance, and fear of being one's true self in hostile environments. The disguise as protection from a world that cannot safely see one's true form resonates with experiences of hiding queer identity in situations where revelation might bring danger or rejection. Mimikyu's ultimate acceptance by those who see beyond the disguise mirrors experiences of coming out to supportive people who love you for who you are rather than the performance you maintain for safety. These various interpretive lenses demonstrate Mimikyu's richness as text open to multiple readings. The character works on literal level as ghost Pokémon with tragic curse. It works on metaphorical level as representation of struggles with self-image and acceptance. It works on symbolic level as embodiment of various marginalized experiences. The capacity to function across these interpretive levels simultaneously makes Mimikyu unusually sophisticated for a creature in a game series primarily aimed at children, showing that children's media can contain meaningful complexity when creators trust their audience. The discussion of death themes in Mimikyu's lore represents Pokemon's ongoing negotiation with mature subject matter within family-friendly framework. Mimikyu's curse can kill those who see its true form. This is dark content, explicitly addressing death in direct terms. However, the presentation is fantastical enough, removed enough from realistic depictions of death, that it remains appropriate for younger audiences while still carrying weight for older players. This balance allows Pokemon to address serious themes without becoming inappropriate for its core demographic. The ghost type category in general allows Pokemon to explore death and the supernatural in ways that would be impossible with other type categories. Ghosts in fiction provide safe distance for discussing death, being dead themselves, or connected to death in fundamental ways. Mimikyu as ghost type can have deadly curse while remaining within acceptable boundaries, because ghost types exist in space between life and death where normal rules don't fully apply. The type category itself provides narrative justification for darker themes. The responsibility Game Freak and the Pokemon Company bear as creators of media consumed by children informs decisions about how far to push Mimikyu's darker elements. Content must be age appropriate while respecting that children can engage with complex emotions and situations. Mimikyu walks this line carefully, presenting genuinely sad and somewhat frightening situation while framing it in ways that aren't traumatizing. The curse is real, but primarily exists as abstract threat rather than explicitly shown violence. The loneliness is palpable, but resolved through found family and acceptance. The philosophical questions raised by Mimikyu's existence extend into territory of identity and essence. If Mimikyu is never seen without its disguise, if the disguise is the only form anyone ever perceives, does the disguise become Mimikyu's true form in practical terms? The question of whether identity is defined by internal essence or external perception has occupied philosophers for centuries. Mimikyu embodies this question, a creature whose internal reality differs drastically from how it's perceived, forcing consideration of which version is more real in meaningful sense. The existential dimension of Mimikyu's predicament involves questions about authenticity and self-determination. Mimikyu chose to wear the disguise, actively creating and maintaining the costume. This choice represents agency, Mimikyu deciding how to present itself to the world. However, the choice is constrained by the curse, made under duress from circumstances beyond Mimikyu's control. The tension between agency and constraint in Mimikyu's situation mirrors human experiences of making choices within limited options, doing the best we can with circumstances we didn't choose. The phenomenological aspect of being Mimikyu invites consideration of what subjective experience might be like for this cursed creature. What does it feel like to exist behind a barrier that can never be removed? How does one experience the world when all sensation is mediated through cloth? Does Mimikyu even remember or know what its true form looks like? Or has the disguise become so permanent that Mimikyu has lost connection to its own appearance? These questions about subjective experience add psychological depth to Mimikyu as character. The social contract implied by Mimikyu's disguise establishes unspoken agreement between Mimikyu and those who encounter it. Everyone pretends the disguise is not a disguise, or at least refrains from trying to remove it. This mutual performance of normalcy protects Mimikyu while allowing social interaction to proceed. The disguise becomes common knowledge that everyone agrees not to acknowledge, a polite fiction maintained for everyone's benefit. This social dynamic mirrors many real-world situations where people tacitly agree not to mention uncomfortable truths to maintain social harmony. The ethics of curiosity regarding Mimikyu's true form present interesting moral questions. Is it ethical to want to see what's beneath the disguise when doing so could cause harm? Does intellectual curiosity justify risk to others? These questions become particularly relevant in the anime when Meowth attempts to satisfy his curiosity and nearly dies as a result. The incident serves as cautionary tale about respecting boundaries even when curiosity is strong, about recognizing that some knowledge comes at unacceptable cost. The consent issues implicit in Mimikyu's situation add another ethical dimension. Mimikyu presumably does not consent to people seeing its true form, hence the disguise. Attempting to remove the disguise without permission violates Mimikyu's bodily autonomy, regardless of what might be revealed. This framing makes the curse less about supernatural punishment and more about natural consequence of violating consent, adding layer of moral clarity to what might otherwise seem like arbitrary magical rule. The power dynamics in relationships involving Mimikyu deserve examination. Does Mimikyu's need for acceptance create imbalance where others hold power over its emotional well-being? Can Mimikyu truly have equal relationships when it fears rejection so intensely? These questions about power and vulnerability in relationships apply to many real situations where one party has greater emotional need or less social power. Mimikyu's relationships with Jessie and Team Rocket could be analyzed through these lenses, considering whether Mimikyu's desperation for acceptance made it susceptible to exploitation. However, the anime presents Team Rocket's relationship with Mimikyu as relatively healthy despite potential power imbalances. They don't exploit Mimikyu's vulnerability. They accept its Pikachu obsession while also caring for it as individual. Jessie, in particular, shows genuine affection without demanding Mimikyu change or conform beyond what it already attempts. This positive relationship dynamic suggests that awareness of power imbalance and conscious effort to address it can create healthy relationships even when inherent inequality exists. The redemptive arc Mimikyu experiences in anime provides model for processing and moving beyond resentment and self-hatred. Mimikyu doesn't achieve redemption through changing what it is or overcoming its curse. It achieves redemption through changing its relationship to these unchangeable facts, through accepting that it has value despite its circumstances. This internal shift, rather than external change, represents mature approach to dealing with unresolvable difficulties, finding peace through acceptance rather than false hope for transformation. The grief implicit in Mimikyu's story relates to grieving for self, one can never be, for life, one can never have. Mimikyu grieves for its inability to be seen without causing harm, for the impossibility of ever being as naturally loved as Pikachu. This grief is complex because what's being grieved was never possible, requiring Mimikyu to mourn something that never existed rather than something lost. The process of accepting impossible desires and finding peace with limited reality forms a core of Mimikyu's emotional journey. The resilience Mimikyu demonstrates in continuing to seek connection despite repeated implicit rejection shows remarkable strength. Or it would be easier to give up, to embrace isolation rather than risk continued disappointment. Mimikyu's persistent effort to connect, to maintain its disguise, to keep trying to be part of social world, represents courage that deserves recognition. The character models resilience, not as invulnerability, but as continuing to try despite vulnerability, showing that courage is an absence of fear, but action despite fear. The found family theme in Mimikyu's anime storyline speaks to importance of chosen relationships over biological or conventional family structures. Team Rocket becomes Mimikyu's family, not through blood or formal adoption, but through mutual care and acceptance. This chosen family provides what biological connections or conventional social structures failed to provide: acceptance without judgment, companionship without demands for conformity. The message that family can be found and built rather than only inherited or assigned resonates with many people whose biological families have failed to provide necessary support. The transformation of Mimikyu's relationship with Pikachu from hatred to indifference represents healthy emotional development. Mimikyu doesn't need to love Pikachu or become friends with it. It simply needs to stop letting Pikachu occupy so much emotional space, to stop using Pikachu as measure against which to judge itself. The final confrontation between Mimikyu and Pikachu ends not with reconciliation, but with Mimikyu walking away, choosing to invest its energy elsewhere. This resolution respects that not all conflicts resolve through friendship, that sometimes the healthiest choice is disengagement. The maturity required to walk away from a fight you've invested significant emotional energy in demonstrates growth that many people struggle to achieve. Mimikyu has built its identity partially around its Pikachu obsession, and letting that go means rebuilding sense of self without that defining antagonism. The difficulty of this transition is acknowledged in the anime through Mimikyu's visible distress when confronting its reflection. Letting go is portrayed as painful but necessary, a loss that enables future growth. The symbolism of Mimikyu seeing its reflection at crucial moment of character development serves multiple narrative purposes. Reflections in storytelling often represent self-awareness or forced confrontation with truth. Mimikyu seeing itself triggers recognition that it cannot become Pikachu, that the pursuit is futile. This moment of clarity, though painful, provides foundation for healthier self-perception. The reflection doesn't show Mimikyu something new, but forces acknowledgement of what it has been avoiding. The beach setting for this pivotal scene adds atmospheric and symbolic resonance. Beaches exist as liminal spaces between land and sea, between stability and change. This in-between quality matches Mimikyu's transitional emotional state, positioned between old hatred and new acceptance, between defining itself through Pikachu and discovering its own identity. The location choice supports the narrative moment, using environment to reinforce character development. The water imagery throughout this sequence connects to themes of reflection, truth, and transformation. Water in narrative contexts often represents emotion, unconscious mind, or cleansing transformation. Mimikyu collapsing in water after confronting its reflection could be read as baptismal moment, symbolic death of old identity and rebirth into healthier self-perception. The fact that Pikachu and Ash save Mimikyu from drowning adds layer of care and interconnection, suggesting that transformation requires both self-recognition and support from others. The rescue as act of compassion, despite their antagonistic history, demonstrates moral complexity beyond simple good versus evil dynamics. Pikachu has every reason to let Mimikyu drown after all the times Mimikyu has attacked it. Choosing mercy instead shows Pikachu's inherent kindness and Ash's influence in teaching compassion even toward enemies. This moral example influences Mimikyu's subsequent choices, suggesting that receiving unearned kindness can inspire personal growth. The parallel between Mimikyu being saved from physical drowning and being saved from metaphorical drowning in its own resentment and self-hatred creates narrative coherence. Both forms of drowning represented death, one literal and one spiritual. The rescue operates on both levels, Pikachu saving Mimikyu's life, while also inadvertently saving it from emotional self-destruction. This dual salvation, physical and emotional, marks turning point where Mimikyu's story shifts from tragedy toward hope. The aftermath of this confrontation shows Mimikyu changed but not magically healed. It still wears the disguise. The curse remains. Its true form is still dangerous. What has changed and is Mimikyu's emotional relationship to these facts and its understanding of its own value. This realistic portrayal of growth as change in perspective rather than change in circumstances provides healthier model than stories that resolve through external transformation. The bittersweet quality of Mimikyu's ending in Alola arc reflects life's complexity, where victories are rarely complete and happiness coexists with lingering sadness. Mimikyu achieves acceptance, but must leave the trainers who provided it. It overcomes its Pikachu obsession, but the curse remains. It finds peace, but not perfection. This nuanced resolution respects audience intelligence by refusing to tie everything up neatly, acknowledging that real growth is messy and incomplete. The long-term impact of Mimikyu's character on Pokémon franchise includes raising audience expectations for emotional depth and narrative sophistication. Future Ghost-type Pokémon are implicitly compared to Mimikyu's standard of character development and thematic richness. This pressure pushes creators toward more thoughtful design and storytelling, elevating overall quality. Even if future Pokémon don't match Mimikyu's specific appeal, the attempt to reach similar emotional resonance benefits the franchise. The commercial success of Mimikyu merchandise demonstrated that darker, more complex Pokémon could be as marketable as straightforwardly cute designs. This business insight empowered creators to take more risks with character design, knowing that commercial viability doesn't require simplicity or conventional cuteness. The market validation of Mimikyu's success provides cover for future experimental designs that might otherwise be rejected as too risky for mass market appeal. The critical acclaim received by Mimikyu's anime episodes and character arc showed that Pokémon anime could tell sophisticated stories when it chose to invest in character development. These episodes are frequently cited as highlights of the Alola season, demonstrating that audiences respond positively to emotional depth and narrative complexity. This critical response potentially influenced decisions about how much attention to give character development in future seasons, showing that investment in storytelling yields both artistic and popular success. The educational potential of Mimikyu extends beyond informal discussions to structured curriculum applications. Teachers have used Mimikyu in lessons about bullying, self esteem, and social emotional learning. The character provides accessible entry point for difficult conversations, allowing students to discuss heavy topics through safer lens of fictional character. Educational materials featuring Mimikyu help children develop emotional intelligence and empathy while engaging with content they find inherently interesting. The psychological literature examining fictional character attachment includes studies mentioning Mimikyu as example of character that forms strong bonds with audiences despite or because of its flawed nature. Research into why people connect with imperfect, struggling characters rather than perfect heroes has used Mimikyu as case study. The character's popularity, despite being cursed and socially challenged, supports theories about how vulnerability and struggle increase rather than decrease audience identification with characters. The artistic techniques used to create official Mimikyu art across various media demonstrate sophisticated understanding of how to visualize character through visual language. The rough, imperfect quality of the costume is maintained consistently while being rendered in different artistic styles. Whether pixel art, 3D models, traditional animation, or digital illustration, Mimikyu's essential character comes through. This consistency across media requires clear communication of character essence to all artists working on Mimikyu related content, supported by detailed style guides and reference materials. The color theory behind Mimikyu's design choices creates psychological effects that support its characterization. The faded yellow of the costume suggests age and wear, creating immediate impression of something that has existed in difficult circumstances. The black drawn features contrast sharply with the lighter fabric, creating simple but effective focal points that guide viewer attention. The subtle darkness in the shadow beneath the costume hints at depth and mystery while maintaining visual coherence. These color choices work together to create immediate emotional impression before viewer consciously analyzes the design. The shape language in Mimikyu's design communicates character through form rather than detail. The rounded base of the costume suggests softness and approachability. The jagged cut edges add hint of danger or unnaturalness. The bent wooden tail creates asymmetry that prevents the design from feeling too simple or cute. These shape choices create visual interest while supporting character themes, each formal element reinforcing narrative elements. The integration of form and function in Mimikyu's design exemplifies skilled character design, where every visual choice serves both aesthetic and narrative purposes. The animation principles applied to Mimikyu's movement patterns give characters specific physical personality. The costume doesn't move like body would, instead flowing and bunching in ways that emphasize its fabric nature. This movement quality reminds viewers constantly that Mimikyu is wearing disguise, maintaining awareness of the gap between appearance and reality. The animation of disguise breaking shows dramatic transformation, costumes suddenly drooping and shifting in ways that feel consequential, using motion to underscore mechanical significance of ability activation. The voice direction for Mimikyu creates audio signature as distinctive as its visual design. The echoing quality suggests voice emanating from enclosed space, supporting idea of creature hidden within costume. The pitch and tone avoid being too cute or too frightening, finding middle ground that supports Mimikyu's dual nature as both appealing and unsettling. The consistency of this vocal characterization across different languages and voice actors shows clear direction about how Mimikyu should sound, supporting consistent character recognition globally. The musical themes associated with Mimikyu in various games and anime use minor keys and unusual instrumentation to create atmosphere that matches the character's nature. Ghost type Pokemon often receive music with supernatural qualities, but Mimikyu's themes add layers of melancholy that distinguish it from other ghosts. The musical characterization works with visual and narrative elements to create complete sensory portrait, engaging multiple aspects of perception to reinforce character identity. The lasting contribution of Mimikyu to Pokemon's legacy lies not just in its individual popularity, but in what it represents about franchise's potential. It demonstrated that Pokemon can be more than cute creatures for collecting and battling. It can be meaningful characters with emotional depth and narrative significance. It can be vehicles for exploring complex themes while remaining accessible to all ages. It can be commercially successful while being artistically ambitious. Mimikyu proved these things not through argument, but through example, through simply existing and resonating with millions of people worldwide. The future possibilities for Mimikyu within Pokemon franchise remain open and full of potential. New games might explore Mimikyu in different regions or contexts. New anime seasons might check in on Mimikyu's continued development. New merchandise will continue bringing Mimikyu into physical spaces of fans' lives. Whatever specific forms these future appearances take, Mimikyu's core character will likely remain recognizable, the cursed ghost in the handmade costume, seeking acceptance and finding surprising strength in its vulnerability. The meaning fans derive from Mimikyu ultimately transcends any specific interpretation or reading. Each person connects with the character for their own reasons, seeing their own struggles reflected in Mimikyu's story. This multiplicity of meaning makes Mimikyu richer than any single reading could capture. The character contains multitudes, supporting diverse interpretations while maintaining coherent core identity. This openness to interpretation while staying true to essential character represents achieved ideal in fictional character creation. The quiet power of Mimikyu's story rests in its refusal to offer easy answers or complete resolution. Life is often like this: problems that cannot be solved, only managed; circumstances that cannot be changed, only accepted. Mimikyu models how to live with such circumstances, how to find meaning and connection despite limitations, how to value yourself when the world seems to send messages that you are unacceptable as you are. These lessons, learned through gentle story about a ghost in a costume, carry weight that more didactic or preachy narratives might fail to achieve. The gentleness with which Mimikyu's story is told belies its emotional weight. The anime never becomes melodramatic or overwrought. The games present lore without excessive exposition. The character works through understatement rather than overstatement, trusting audiences to grasp implications without having everything spelled out explicitly. This restraint in storytelling shows respect for audience intelligence and emotional capacity, allowing people to engage with material at their own depth. Thank you for drifting through the story of a Pokemon who learned that acceptance doesn't come from imitating others, but from finding those who value you as you are. If you enjoyed this gentle journey into Mimikyu's world, there's another video waiting on the left of your screen. Let it play softly beside you. You may drift into sleep while something new unfolds.